She reached for the key that had always been hidden in the hollow gator skull beside the porch swing. Inside, the house smelled of cedar, iron, and dried lavender. Her grandmother's scent, a blend of protection and warning. "Place hasn't changed," Khalil muttered as he stepped in behind her. "No," Amara said, "but something's waiting." They moved through the house slowly. The living room was still cluttered with thick books, bound in skin, and prayer jars sealed with wax. The fireplace was cold, but the mirror above it was covered with black velvet. She hesitated. "My grandmother covered all the mirrors when my mom died." "Tradition," Khalil said, "for the spirit's passage." "No, she said it was so Zahara couldn't look back." Amara pulled the velvet down. The mirror blinked with candlelight that hadn't been lit. Her reflection was strange now. Part flame, part girl, part something older. Something watching. From the corner of the room came the sound of glass shifting. Khalil's blade was out in a breath, his stance wide, instinctual. Amara held up a hand. A woman stepped from the shadows. Not a ghost, not quite. Her skin was pale gold, her eyes sharp as a crow's, and her mouth full of secrets. She wore a dress made of storm clouds and bone buttons. Her hair was woven with copper wire and dried bay leaves. "Granddaughter," the woman said, voice like ash on honey. Amara froze. Her heart knew the face before her mind could name it. "Zahara," she whispered. Khalil moved in front of her. "She's dead. Parts of me are," Zahara said. "But you should know by now. Nothing really dies in this bloodline. Not if it remembers." Amara stepped forward, past Khalil. "Why now?" she asked. "Why show yourself now?" Zahara tilted her head. "Because you're ready. Because I couldn't come until you opened the path, until you uncoiled the curse. You were watching. Always." There was no comfort in her voice, no warmth, just inevitability. "You lied to us," Amara said, voice cracking. "You made my mother bear it alone." "I gave her what I had," Zahara said. "It wasn't enough. That's why you have to finish it." Amara swallowed hard. "Finish what?" Zahara lifted her hand. A flame ignited in her palm, but it didn't burn. It shimmered like a memory. "The hollowing," she said. "It's not just a curse. It's a vault. It holds something down there, something that was never meant to rise, but it's stirring now. You can feel it, can't you?" Amara said nothing. Zahara stepped closer. "The bloodline's been a lid on that thing for generations. But lids crack. They always do. So you want me to seal it again?" "No," Zahara said. "I want you to end it, for good. Which means going where none of us dared. Not even me." The fire in her palm surged, and with it came a pulse Amara felt in her bones. "What's down there?" she asked. Zahara smiled, but it was a sad, knowing smile. Whatever remembers being forgotten. Amara didn't flinch as Zahara's fire drew closer. Instead, she reached toward it. The flame trembled, but did not retreat. When her fingers met it, there was no pain, only a warmth that slid through her palm and into her chest, like the pulse of a memory too old to name. "What did you bind down there?" she asked. Zahara looked past her, toward the darkened hallway where family portraits lined the walls. "We bound hunger, not the kind that eats food, the kind that eats names, that eats lineage, that devours the memory of the living." Khalil narrowed his eyes. "You mean the hollowing was never meant to curse your line. It was your line's curse to carry." "Now you understand," Zahara said. "The curse wasn't punishment. It was the lock." Amara's legs felt suddenly weak. She sat on the worn settee her grandmother used to sew on, the scent of camphor rising faintly from its cushions. "And Mama knew?" "She knew enough," Zahara said. "She knew the blood would call someone strong enough to finish the vow, to unmake it, not just carry it forward." "Why not you?" Amara asked, her voice rough. Zahara's eyes flickered. "I tried. I failed. I fled." She moved to the window and drew back the curtain. Moonlight touched her face, like it still remembered loving her once. I was 27 when the hollowing took my sister. She'd broken the chain, tried to leave. The curse doesn't like desertion. So I returned. I did what I thought would contain it, but I couldn't finish it. I never had the fire. You think I do? I know you do. Amara glanced at Khalil, whose hand still rested on the blade. If I go down there, if I finish it, what happens to me? Zahara turned from the window, her face unreadable. You burn. Amara stood, rage rising under her skin like a second skin of smoke. Then what the hell is the point? The point, Zahara said gently, is that your fire will be the last one ever needed. I don't want to die for a secret I didn't ask for. You already did, Zahara said. The moment you let that flame in, that old version of you is gone. Amara stepped closer until they were nearly nose to nose. Then help me do more than carry this. Help me kill it. Zahara didn't smile, but something in her eyes softened. You'll need more than me. Behind them, the front door creaked open without being touched. The wind howled, sharp as a scream. On the porch, 3 women stood in a half circle, heads veiled in black lace, hands dripping with candle wax and red string. The Sisters of the Hollow, Zahara whispered. I didn't call them. They felt you. Khalil moved protectively in front of Amara. Friends of yours? They're the last remnants of the vow, keepers of the hollow's edge. They've been waiting a long time for the flame to rise. The center sister stepped forward, her voice low, frayed like dried leaves. The blood burns brighter this time. The seal is weak, and something below has remembered its hunger. Amara stared at them. Then take me there. No, the sister said. We don't take. We watch. We witness. You will walk into it alone. Zahara placed a hand on Amara's shoulder. Not alone. You'll take what I couldn't. She pressed something into Amara's palm, a pendant, round and scorched, with the carving of a flame around a crescent moon. It pulsed with faint heat. It'll guide you to the mouth, Zahara said. But after that, your will must be stronger than its want. What happens if it isn't? Zahara didn't answer. The woods behind the house were different now. The trees leaned in as if listening. The dirt path wound like a snake, lined with crushed bones and salt that glimmered in the moonlight. The sisters walked ahead, soundless as mist. Khalil stayed behind Amara, blade still drawn, gaze alert. They came to a glade where the earth had cracked in a perfect circle. The trees didn't grow here. The wind didn't blow. In the center was a stone altar, and just beyond it, a hole. No, not a hole, a mouth. It breathed. Amara stepped toward it. How long has it been open? 113 years, said the eldest sister. It opens to feed. It closes once the blood appeases it. She stepped aside. It didn't close last time. Zahara's voice was quiet. Because I lied. Everyone turned to her. I said I sealed it. I didn't. I couldn't. I made a false veil, a glamour over the wound. It's been bleeding ever since. Amara stared down into the hollow. Blackness stared back. What do I do when I'm inside? Speak your name, Zahara said. Then burn it. Burn everything. Let it taste your truth. That's the only thing it can't consume. Khalil reached for her hand. You don't have to go alone. Let me follow. No, Zahara said. Only the bloodline walks into the hollow. If anyone else enters, they'll be turned to ash before they can scream. Amara looked at Khalil, then Zahara, then the sisters. Then she stepped into the mouth. The descent was slow. The path beneath her feet was warm, pulsing, alive. The walls shimmered with veins of silver and coal. She could hear whispers, Not words, just emotion. Grief, hunger, loneliness, and beneath it all, remembrance. She reached the bottom after what felt like hours. It was a chamber carved from fire and forgotten names. Pillars of stone rose from a floor of bone ash. In the center stood a throne, and on it sat a figure. It wore her mother's face, but the eyes were empty, the mouth twisted in mockery. Amara, it said. Little fire, little fool. She clenched her fists. You're not her. No, it said, but she's part of me now. All of them are. Every woman who walked this path and burned instead of breaking it. Amara took a step forward. Not this time. The figure laughed. You came here to end me? Child, I am you. The memory you bury. I am the grief you dress up in love. I am the fire before it learns to cleanse. Amara raised the pendant Zahara had given her. The figure hissed. What is that? Truth. She held it to her chest. Her blood responded. My name is Amara Whitaker, she said, voice rising. Daughter of Sybil, granddaughter of Zahara, descendant of the vow. I do not carry you. I unmake you. The ground shook. The hollow screamed. The throne cracked. The figure lunged. Amara lit the flame. It wasn't fire as she'd known it. It was memory made bright. It was every song her mother sang, every warning whispered over boiling pots. Every night she'd cried into her pillow, and every morning she'd stood up anyway. She burned, and the hollow howled. The fire consumed the figure, then the throne, then the chamber itself. Amara stood at the center of it all, a blaze wrapped in flesh. She screamed, not in pain, but in defiance. I am the last, I am the end. The flame roared, then dimmed, and all was still. When Amara woke, she was lying in the glade. The moon had moved. The trees no longer leaned. The sisters were gone. Zahara knelt beside her, eyes wet. You did it, she whispered. Amara sat up. Her skin was unburned, but something inside her was gone, or maybe finally whole. Khalil ran to her, falling to his knees. You're alive, he said, voice breaking. She nodded. The hollow? He asked. Amara looked at the cracked ground, now sealed with stone and salt. It's gone. Zahara touched her cheek. Then so am I. What? My purpose was to pass the flame. You've done more. You ended it. Zahara began to fade, her skin turning to embers, her eyes the last to go. Thank you, she said, for remembering. Then she was ash on the wind. They didn't speak for a long time. The sun rose slowly, and with it, birds began to sing. Real ones, not omens, not warnings, just life. Amara reached for Khalil's hand. He squeezed it tight. I'm still here, she whispered. Yes, he said, you're not the same. She looked at her hands, her arms, her heart. Everything was quieter now. No hunger, no heat, just peace. Because when blood remembers and finally lets go, what's left is something sacred, something free. The woods exhaled around them as the first hint of dawn painted a bruise of violet across the horizon. Amara stood with Khalil beneath the arching oaks, the silence between them, not empty, but brimming with everything they could not yet say. She could still feel the remnants of the flame, curled in her bones. Not burning, but witnessing. A steady warmth, like the memory of her mother's hand in hers. Do you remember any of it? Khalil asked softly, eyes on the sealed ground. Amara turned her gaze downward, where the hollow had been, where so many voices had been lost. The stone that sealed it now bore her sigil, a flame encircled by crescent leaves, etched not by tools, but by the flame itself. I remember everything, she said. He took a slow breath. And do you feel like you again? No, she said. But maybe that's the point. I'm not who I was. I'm not just a girl grieving her mama. I'm not just a name in a cursed line. I'm the one who chose to end it. Khalil's hand reached out, brushing her shoulder. You did more than that. You gave all of them back their names. She swallowed hard. Then I hope they find peace. All the ones who came before. Mama, Zahara, even the ones I never knew. They began walking back toward the house, the woods slowly releasing their breath. The sisters were gone. The trail of red string had burned away, leaving only the scent of iron and rosewood. With each step, Amara felt the weight of the vow lifting. Her feet touched the earth differently now, grounded, not bound. Do you think it'll stay sealed? She asked. Khalil glanced over his shoulder. With what you did down there, it's not just sealed. It's changed. The curse needed someone to remember and someone to choose something else. You gave it both. I was afraid I wouldn't be enough, she whispered. You weren't, he said. But you were more than enough with what you carried. A long silence passed. Amara watched the house come into view. Its windows still held the golden hue of candlelight, but the shadows inside no longer moved like watchers. It felt like home again, not a tomb or a trap. Zahara's voice echoed faintly in her thoughts. Let it taste your truth. Khalil nudged her gently with his shoulder. So what now, Flamekeeper? She smiled faintly. I rest. I eat something that isn't soaked in ghost grief. And then I figure out what living looks like without a curse pressing on my throat. He chuckled. That sounds about right. They stepped onto the porch together. Amara paused, running her hand along the old wooden rail. It feels different. It is different. Inside, the air was no longer heavy, no longer thick with secrets or echoes. The pictures on the wall looked clearer somehow, like the faces in them had softened. No longer trapped in the shadows of silence. I heard you. I felt you. And I carried you all the way through. She touched the frame, then turned toward the stairs. Upstairs, the bedroom Zahara had kept sealed for decades was now open. Inside, candles burned low, but nothing stirred. The journal on the dresser had reopened to a blank page. The scent of lavender and burnt sugar hung in the air. Amara stepped inside, heart pounding gently, but not from fear. She walked to the window, opened it wide, and let the breeze in. Khalil leaned against the doorframe. You okay? I think I might be, she said, for the first time. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The sun broke fully over the horizon then, spilling gold over the salt marsh in the distance. Light touched the water and made it shimmer like a mirror to another world. Amara stood in the stillness of her reclaimed name. Her blood remembered, and it had chosen to live. Chapter 18. The last time I let her go. Chapter separator. The last time Amara let her mother go. It was a whisper against the wind, not a scream. There had been no grand ritual, no final rites, just a closed casket beneath a willow tree and a sky too blue for mourning. But this time, standing at the edge of the salt marsh, where Zahara had first bound Flame to flesh, it was different. The letting go came not from her hands, but from her blood. The marsh was quiet in that strange, listening way it always had been. Not silent, never truly silent, but steeped in breath, memory, and the rustle of reeds like old women muttering stories. Amara waded through the brambles that once frightened her as a child, the low fog brushing at her knees like clinging spirits, unwilling to release her just yet. She carried nothing but a small satchel of Zahara's things. Her old tarot deck, a broken charm strung with dried herbs, and the bone comb Amara had used to braid her hair the night before the fever took her. They weren't offerings. They weren't meant to appease. They were memories stitched into the living world with intent. Behind her, Khalil waited on the old dock, his eyes dark with the kind of silence that respected grief. He didn't offer to follow. He knew this was something she had to do alone. Amara reached the patch of water Zahara used to call the still mouth. It was where the marsh swallowed secrets and never spoke them again. As a girl, Amara believed it was where lost voices lived, buried in the silt, with teeth and prayers. Now she knew it was the place Zahara had first kissed the veil and chosen fire over freedom. She knelt, the hem of her skirt soaking in the marsh water, and pulled the satchel into her lap. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. "Mama," she said softly, "you once told me you couldn't rest until I found my own flame." She opened the satchel. The tarot deck was frayed with age, soft at the corners like a well-worn secret. She pulled a single card from the top. The Tower. Of course. Sudden change. Upheaval. Truth striking like lightning. Amara smiled sadly. "You always said the cards didn't lie, but you never said they told the whole truth either." She set the card in the water. It floated for a moment before the marsh claimed it. Next was the charm, cracked bone and dried rue. It had hung on the back of Zahara's bedroom door her whole life. Amara remembered the scent of it burning during storms, the way Zahara whispered to it in tongues she never taught. She kissed it once, then dropped it in. The last was the comb. Her fingers hesitated, curled around it like a final tether to girlhood. She had combed through Zahara's grays with it, while her mother hummed old songs through pursed lips. She had watched those lips go still. She had buried the comb in a drawer, like that would make it forget. Amara pressed it to her chest. "I hated you for leaving me. Even when I knew you were trying to protect me. I hated you for what you didn't say, for making me figure it all out with fire in my lungs and ghosts in my mouth." She let the words sit. "I don't hate you anymore." She placed the comb on the surface of the water. This time it didn't sink. It floated out and caught the edge of the reeds, where it rocked gently. Held. Amara stood. The marsh watched. The wind stirred. And from somewhere in the tall grass, she swore she heard Zahara's voice, low and warm like it had been in life. "Let go, baby. I'm already with you." She turned back toward the dock. Khalil had not moved, but something in his stance softened when she met his gaze. "You ready?" he asked as she approached. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm coming anyway." They walked the path back toward the house, the sky growing brighter with each step. Amara didn't look back, not this time. At the edge of the property, where the old gate sagged on rusted hinges, she paused. A strange sensation curled in her belly. Not fear, not fire, something else. She pressed a hand to the wood and felt a warmth pulse beneath her skin, distant but steady. "She's really gone, isn't she?" she said. Khalil didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Not gone, just given back." Amara stepped through the gate. The wind shifted, and for the first time since her mother's death, the house didn't feel haunted. The sun had risen higher. By the time Amara stepped inside the house, she expected it to feel colder somehow, without Zahara's presence, the air thinner, the walls hollow. But instead, there was a fullness, as though the home had sighed out a burden and finally remembered how to breathe. She moved slowly through the front room, touching the mantel, the edge of the table, the peeling wallpaper. Everything was just as it had been. The crooked photo of her grandmother on the wall, the ashtray with half-burned sage, the velvet chair that held Zahara's shape, even when she wasn't in it. But it wasn't sorrow that pressed on Amara's chest. It was clarity, a deep knowing. This place didn't hold her mother's ghost. It held her will. In the kitchen, Khalil leaned against a counter with a coffee mug in hand, watching her with that same quiet weight. He said nothing as she passed, just tipped his chin slightly in acknowledgement. She poured herself a cup of chicory from the still warm pot and sat across from him at the table. "I thought I'd feel empty," she said. "You don't?" "I feel heavier." She touched her chest. "Like I'm carrying more of her now, not less. ... Khalil nodded slowly. "Because you are. She gave you the fire, and you let her go. That's what makes it real. Not the salt, not the marsh. The choice." Amara looked down at her hands. The lines in her palms had changed. The once faint crescent that Zahara used to trace with her thumb had deepened, darkened, like it had been burned into her. "There's something else," Amara murmured. "Something I saw when I was in the marsh." Khalil sat straighter. "What kind of something?" "A shadow. Not her. Not mine." She swallowed. It was watching, waiting. Not like the spirits. Older, deeper. It's been there a long time. I think it remembers the first flame. And I think it's waking up." Khalil's jaw tensed. He put down the mug. "Did you speak to it?" "No, it didn't speak. It felt me. That was enough." He rose and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to glance outside. "Then we don't have time to rest. If the deep ones are stirring." "I don't think it wants me dead." Khalil turned, his brow furrowed. "I think it wants me to finish what she started." The words rang out louder than she expected. Final. Inevitable. Her heart quickened in response. Outside, the marsh wind shifted again, and the crows began to circle low. That night, she dreamed of the fire again. But this time, it wasn't Zahara at the center. It was herself. She stood in a ring of bone and salt, her eyes black with embers, her hands open as flames licked up her arms without burning. Around her, women stood shoulder to shoulder, cloaked in veils of smoke and moonlight. Some wore braids wrapped in copper. Others bore ash tattoos on their cheeks. All of them watched Amara, not in judgment, but in recognition. One stepped forward. "You're the last," the woman said. Her voice was low and guttural, like cracking wood. "But you're not alone." Amara's throat tightened. "What is this?" "The covenant reborn, through grief, through blood, through fire." The woman lifted a hand and pointed to the sky. Above, the moon bled into a deep red. The stars flickered, then went dark. Amara felt a heat rise inside her. Not fear, but certainty. Power. "The gate must be sealed again," the woman said, "or all that was buried will come screaming." "Who are you?" The woman didn't answer. Instead, she pressed a hand to Amara's heart and whispered something in a tongue she didn't know, but felt like a lullaby her bones had always remembered. The other women joined in, humming low, thrumming beneath her skin like drumbeats. The world turned. She woke with tears on her cheeks and the taste of ash on her tongue. She didn't speak of the dream. Not yet. Some things needed time to root before they were shared. But she did return to Zahara's journal that afternoon, flipping past the pages she had already deciphered, moving deeper into the ones layered with wax seals and blood ink. She found it in a folded section, tucked behind an old sketch of the stillmouth, the binding song. The words were written in Zahara's hand, but shakier than usual, either from exhaustion or fear. Amara couldn't tell. It was more poem than spell, more prayer than command. A litany for tethering flame to soul. She read it aloud softly, once, then again. The flame in her belly responded with a dull throb. She ran her fingers across the page, then over the mark on her palm. A connection sparked. From the hallway, she heard a soft knock. "Khalil, we've got visitors," he said. She stood, brushing past the lingering haze of the journal's magic, and followed him out onto the porch. There, standing at the edge of the yard, were three figures cloaked in black. No faces, no footsteps in the dirt, just stillness. Amara didn't flinch. Khalil stepped forward. "Can I help you?" One of them spoke. "The blood has returned to the salt. The marsh remembers. So do we." Amara stepped ahead of Khalil, eyes locked on the tallest of the three. "You came for her?" she said. "No, we came for you." Khalil tensed, his hand drifting toward the knife beneath his coat. But Amara lifted her hand. "What do you want?" "To see if you are worthy." A wind rose, strong and sudden. The salt in the air thickened. The marsh stirred, and deep beneath it all, something old uncoiled. Amara squared her shoulders. "Then let the veil judge me." The tallest of the cloaked figures stepped forward, and though their face remained shadowed beneath the hood, Amara could feel their gaze on her, sharp, pricking, not unlike nettles dragged across bare skin. She didn't move. Neither did the figure. The two of them were caught in a standstill of breath and will. "You bear her mark," the figure said, voice hollow but feminine. "But fire can be stolen. Flame can be mimicked. Are you her heir in name only?" Amara held her chin high. "I didn't take Zahara's place. I lived through what she couldn't. That's the difference." Something shifted in the air. A ripple. She felt along her arms, like the tremor of a spider's web. The second figure raised a hand, and from their palm dropped a white lily, its petals brittle, tinged with red at the center. It landed in the dirt without sound. "Then prove it," they said. "Pass through the gauntlet." Khalil stepped forward, the blade now gleaming in his hand. "She doesn't answer to you. She passed the old trials in the marsh. She burned for it." Amara touched his arm. "No," she said softly. "Let them test me." He looked at her, like she'd betrayed him. But he stepped back without argument. The third figure finally spoke, barely more than a whisper. "Then kneel." Amara did. They circled her slowly. As they passed behind her back, she could feel the heat rise again. Not her own flame, but theirs. All three of them radiated power, old and strange, not from Zahara's line, but parallel to it. An older covenant, a hidden one. Salt was poured in a perfect circle around her. Black feathers were laid at the 4 points. The lily was placed in the center of her open palms. "The first trial is remembrance," the first voice said. "Call her name, but not her given one." Amara's brow furrowed. "You want me to name my mother?" "No," said the second voice. "You must name what she became." She closed her eyes, holding the lily tighter. She thought of Zahara's voice, her fury, her songs, her spells. She thought of the pain, the silence, the depth of her grief. She thought of the fire, always the fire. "She became the weeping flame," Amara whispered. The salt around her sizzled. "Correct," said the third. "The second trial is surrender." "What do you give up to keep the flame alive?" Amara didn't answer right away. Her mind raced. Her mother had surrendered everything. Her body, her name, her daughter. Amara had watched her bleed it all out into the marsh and the spell and the curse. Was she now being asked to do the same? "My past," Amara said finally. "The safety of forgetting. The comfort of not knowing what she carried. I surrender the idea that I could ever be untouched by this." The wind stopped. Accepted, they said in unison. A shadow passed over the moon. The final trial, the tallest figure said, is reckoning. What will you become to those who curse your name? Amara lifted her head. I'll be the thing that ends them. A long silence followed. The air itself seemed to hesitate. Then all three figures lifted their arms, and the salt circle ignited. Flame rose high around her, white hot and whistling like a storm. It did not burn her. It bowed to her. When the fire vanished, the figures were gone. Only the lily remained in her hand. Now bright red, alive, its petals pulsing with heat like a beating heart. She stood and walked inside. That night, she couldn't sleep. Neither could Khalil. They sat together on the front porch, the marsh wind pulling at their clothes. The stars were dim. Something loomed beneath the surface of the bayou, restless and watching. What comes next? He asked. Whatever was sealed is trying to unseal itself. Khalil exhaled slowly. You're the last one who can stop it. Maybe not, she said. There are others. I saw them in the dream. Witchblood? Covenant-born, she corrected. They remember the old songs. Some are hiding. Some don't even know what they are yet. But I felt them. Khalil glanced over at her. Then you need to call them. Amara nodded. She pulled Zahara's journal from her bag. Flipping back to a page with strange markings, sigils surrounded by names she hadn't dared to speak aloud until now. The Circle of Nine, the Binding Flames, the last survivors of the broken vow. We'll need to head south first, she said, toward the coast. That's where the next anchor was set. He frowned. That's cursed ground. So am I. He smiled grimly. You're more than a curse. Maybe, but that doesn't mean I'm not dangerous. He leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers. I'd follow you anyway. They didn't speak again that night. Not until the first sign came, a low, warbling sound from the trees. A shape standing at the far edge of the road. Not quite a person, not quite a ghost. It watched her. She stood. I think the gate is already opening, she whispered. They left the next morning. The sky was overcast, the sun a dull coin behind thick clouds. Amara wore Zahara's cloak now, altered with her own stitching, her own spell thread. She packed the journal, the lily, and a handful of relics they'd found beneath the house. Bones wrapped in silver string, teeth carved with runes, a mirror that reflected only blood. Khalil loaded the truck with supplies, shotgun, knives, a flask of Zahara's ash. They both knew it wouldn't be enough, but they carried it anyway. As they pulled away from the house, Amara looked back one last time. The porch, the window, the tree with the glass bottles that used to rattle when the wind was wrong. Goodbye, she whispered. The house did not answer, but a crow followed them down the road. By midday, they reached the edge of the salt marsh and crossed into deeper bayou. The further they traveled, the stranger the land became. Trees bent inward like they were listening. Water moved without wind. The scent of jasmine turned sharp, like iron. And then they heard it again. A song. Not sung aloud, but vibrating beneath their skin. Ancient, trembling, female. Amara closed her eyes. She's calling them too, she murmured. Whatever's in the deep. Then we better get to them first. They drove faster. That evening, they reached the coast. It was quiet, too quiet. The air hung heavy with fog. The sea was still, black as oil. They parked the truck and made their way on foot to the place marked in Zahara's journal. An old church drowned by time, its bell tower broken, its floor consumed by roots and salt. Inside, Amara stepped onto the threshold and felt the anchor point throb beneath her boots. Here, the veil had thinned. Here, something was trying to cross. She knelt and placed the lily on the ground. It burst into flame. A shape rose from it. A woman, cloaked in red fire. Eyes hollow. Zahara, but not her. A memory of her etched into the spell. Amara didn't flinch. "I'm ready," she whispered. The specter smiled. "Then let the blood remember." Chapter 19. Red Sky Between Us. Chapter Separator. The sky was bleeding again. Amara stood at the edge of the cliff where the sea met the earth like an open wound, the horizon carved in shades of rust and wine. The sun had never set like this before, not even in her dreams. This was something older, more deliberate, as if the world itself had remembered sorrow and couldn't bear to hold it anymore. The sky wept, and so did the tide. Beside her, Khalil said nothing. His eyes tracked the swirling crimson clouds above them, jaw tight, one hand resting near the blade at his hip. The air was too still, the wind too warm. Everything tasted like memory and iron. Amara clutched the journal close to her chest. Zahara's sigils were glowing faintly again, as they had at the first anchor. It meant the barrier was thinning faster than expected. Too fast. And the second gate hadn't even been reached. "She's accelerating the unraveling," Amara said quietly, not needing to name who she was. "The Echo Witch?" Khalil asked. Though his voice was grim, he already knew the answer. Amara nodded, and she's not alone. They had seen the signs for days now. Dried rivers where water once ran. Birds flying in circles until they dropped. Children speaking in tongues in roadside towns. And always the blood-red sky at dusk, vanishing before anyone could explain it. Whispers followed Amara wherever they went, even in her sleep. Zahara's voice was no longer the only one haunting her. She didn't say any of this aloud. Some truths sounded too final when spoken. "Do you think the others will come?" Khalil asked. "They have to," she said, "or this ends with just us." He looked at her then, not with pity, but resolve. "Then it doesn't end." They returned to the truck by twilight, the coastal air slick with sea salt and the scent of burning myrrh. Amara had lit the protection blend Zahara once taught her, letting it cling to their clothes and shield their path. It wouldn't stop the witchfire entirely, but it might slow it. The road south was cracked and swallowed in places, where marsh and Memone had claimed it back. They drove slowly, headlights dimmed. Insects thudded against the windshield like tiny curses. Before midnight, they arrived at the next anchor. It was a ruin. What had once been a plantation house now lay collapsed beneath vines and moss. The columns stood like broken bones, jutting from the earth. A tree had grown straight through the center of the old dining hall, split and blackened. Symbols had been carved in the bark. Protection wards, old sigils, and one symbol Amara didn't recognize. She reached out, fingers hovering just short of the glyph. "It's a memory mark," Khalil said behind her. "From the old marsh priests." "You sure?" she asked. "I saw one once, carved into the inside of a coffin." Amara didn't ask what kind of coffin that had been. She pressed Zahara's journal against the glyph and waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wind reversed direction. A low hum filled the air, rising from the soil. The roots of the tree pulsed. The veil here was thinner than the last. This one was almost ruptured. A scream echoed from the second floor of the ruins. Amara didn't hesitate. She bolted up the cracked staircase, Khalil right behind her. The boards groaned beneath their boots, splinters catching at their clothes. The scream came again, louder, human, but not holy. They found her in the remnants of a nursery. A girl, no older than 13. Eyes white with light, floating a foot above the ground. Her braids hung downward like vines. Blood wept from the corners of her mouth, but she didn't seem in pain. She was glowing. Amara stepped forward slowly. "It's okay," she said gently. "I know what you are." The girl's head tilted. "You're the daughter," she said, voice not her own. Amara's chest tightened. "Of Zahara." "Yes." The girl lowered slightly, her feet brushing the floor. "She called us back," the girl whispered. "We didn't die right. We remember too much." "She didn't want to let you go," Amara said. "She shouldn't have." The room chilled. Frost cracked along the walls. Khalil stepped beside Amara. "What's your name?" he asked the girl. "Mirel," she whispered. "I was the third flame." "Third," Amara repeated. The girl, Mirel, closed her eyes. "9 of us. She lit us all before the blood moon. But I didn't make it to the crossing." Amara stepped closer, risking it. "Then let me finish what she started." Mirel reached out a trembling hand. Her fingers were freezing. "Bind me," she whispered. Amara drew the salt from her pouch, Zahara's circle etched in her mind. Khalil lit the blood candle, its red wax spitting sparks. As the circle closed around Mirel, the wind died. The trees outside stilled. For a moment, there was only the hum of the veil and the thud of 3 hearts, Amara's, Khalil's, and the girl's. "Repeat after me," Amara said, voice steady. "I remember fire," Mirel said. "I remember blood. I remember her name." Amara took a breath, and I returned to it. The flame rose from the candle, and the circle blazed. Mirel's form shimmered, then collapsed forward into Amara's arms. She caught her, holding her tight. The light faded from Mirel's eyes. She slept now, alive, whole, bound to the flame once more. Khalil exhaled, 1 down. Amara stroked Mirel's braid gently. 8 to go. They carried her down from the ruins as the sky began to light again. Not with sun, but with something unnatural. A red dawn rising where no dawn should be. The veil above them shimmered. Something moved behind it. "They're waking," Amara said. "They?" Khalil asked. "The ones who never crossed. The ones who want their names remembered in blood." The road to Bayou Hollow stretched like a scar between the marsh and the memory of flame. They drove through a thick mist that swallowed their headlights whole. Amara sat in the back seat now, cradling Mirel, who hadn't stirred since the binding. Her breath was shallow, her skin like porcelain pulled too tight over bone. But the fire still pulsed beneath it. She was lit from within, like a dying ember waiting for wind. Khalil drove in silence. The air in the truck was dense with unspoken truths. They were too close now for doubt, too far in to pretend this could still end in anything resembling peace. "How much longer?" Amara asked quietly. "Half an hour," Khalil replied, his hands tightening on the wheel. "The marsh is thicker near the hollow. The GPS stopped working 10 miles back. That's because the dead don't like to be found." She said it without thinking. The words felt borrowed. Zahara's, maybe, or someone older. Khalil didn't argue. The trees grew closer, crowding the road, branches black and dripping like twisted fingers. Amara saw things moving in the fog, shapes that disappeared when she looked directly at them. The flame inside her shivered. This was the edge of the last anchorage, the final breach, and she could feel the pull of it, deep in her ribs, as though her blood recognized its own grave. They stopped where the road ended. A rusted gate barred the path ahead, its frame wrapped in hanging bones and salt-dried feathers. Beyond it, nothing but overgrown trail and the hush of unseen watchers. Khalil killed the engine and got out. Amara followed, adjusting the strap on her shoulder. Mirel remained sleeping, but her hand curled tighter around Amara's wrist as they stepped past the gate. The hollow was older than it should have been. No one had lived here in 100 years, yet the air smelled like someone had just boiled lavender and cloves. The scent came in waves, riding the wind like a memory that hadn't finished telling its story. Amara's boots sank into soft ground, the mud warm and pulsing beneath her steps. "She's waiting," Khalil said, voice barely above a whisper. "I know." The house at the center of the hollow was still standing, but just barely. The roof sagged. The porch was half swallowed by vines. Wind chimes made of teeth hung from the eaves, rattling with every gust. A sigil burned on the door, deep red, carved fresh, the shape of a mouth open in a scream. "She's inside," Amara said. Khalil looked at her. "Are we ready?" "No," she answered, "but we're going anyway." They crossed the threshold together. Inside, the air shifted. It wasn't musty or old. It was clean, too clean, as if someone had scrubbed away every trace of time. Candles burned on the stairwell, their flames impossibly still. At the far end of the hall, a shadow moved. Amara stepped forward. The woman who emerged from the dark was not the Echo Witch Amara expected. She looked like her mother. Same hair, same eyes, same cruel tilt to the mouth. But her skin shimmered slightly, like oil on water, and when she spoke, her voice echoed with too many tongues. "You brought her back," the Echo Witch said, eyeing Morel. "She wanted to return," Amara replied. "They always do, until they remember what they were." Amara didn't flinch. "This ends here." The witch laughed. "You think this is an ending? This is a beginning. You lit the first flame when you called her name in blood. And now every name she buried burns to be spoken." Amara stepped forward, placing Morel on the floor gently. She stood between the girl and the witch, fists clenched. "I am the daughter of Sahara, flameborn, bound in blood and fire, and I call this place to judgment." The witch bared her teeth. "Then burn, daughter." The walls rippled. Flame erupted from the baseboards, crawling like serpents. The air twisted with heat and sorrow. Khalil drew his blade. Amara lifted her palm, the sigil of Zahara, glowing bright enough to blind. The flames obeyed her. They curved around her, avoiding Morel, striking at the witch instead. But the witch didn't burn. She caught the fire in her hands, molding it into a dagger of light. She hurled it at Amara. Khalil stepped in its path. The blade struck his shoulder, searing cloth and flesh. He staggered but did not fall. "No," Amara said, voice shaking. "You would bleed for her?" The witch sneered. "I would burn for her," Khalil growled and charged. He collided with the witch, driving her backward. They crashed into the far wall, splintering wood and glass. Amara ran to Morel, trying to rouse her. "Wake up," she whispered. "We need you, now." Morel stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. The white light was gone, replaced by gold. "I remember," she said softly. And then she screamed, not in fear, but in invocation. Flame burst from her mouth and fingertips, wrapping around Amara and searing outward. The witch shrieked, her form unraveling, bones showing through skin, her borrowed face melting into a dozen others. "Zahara was mercy," Amara said, rising, voice thunder. "But I am reckoning." The house shook. Salt fell from the beams above. The walls cracked, splitting along lines of old curses. The sigil Zahara, once carved deep into the structure, reignited. The witch backed away, burning, dissolving into ash and screams. "I remember," Morel cried again, light streaming from her chest. The Echo Witch vanished in a final burst of flame. Silence fell. Amara collapsed beside Morel, pulling her close. Khalil limped over, blood seeping from his shoulder. They sat there in the ash and candlelight, surrounded by ghosts who had found peace. Outside, the red sky began to fade. The hollow had been reclaimed, but Amara knew this wasn't over. The veil had been pierced, names had been spoken, and blood always remembers. She looked at Khalil, at Morel, at the smoldering doorway behind them. "This isn't the end," she said. Khalil nodded. "No, but it's the beginning of the truth." Amara reached for her journal. She had more names to find, and more flames to light. They walked through the wreckage of the hollow in silence. The floorboards hissed and steamed beneath their feet, as if the house itself were sighing in its final breath. Amara moved slowly, guiding Morel's steps as they passed broken glass and scorched bone. The girl's strength was returning, but the fire in her eyes had not settled. Outside, dawn was not yet born. The red sky still lingered above the bayou, like a bruise refusing to fade. "Where do we go now?" Morel asked, voice raspy, her throat marked by all she had screamed out in light. Amara didn't answer at first. She looked over her shoulder at the doorway behind them, now a charred archway of ash and memory. The hollow had tried to bury them. The salt had tried to silence them. But flame always found a way. "To the water," she said. "It's not done." Khalil stepped ahead, his blade sheathed again but stained dark with the blood of things that never lived and yet refused to die. He winced with every step, his wound pressing at him, but he kept moving. "They'll feel what happened here," he muttered. "Every witch, every bloodwalker, everything that feeds on the space between." Amara nodded. "Let them come." They reached the edge of the marsh. The red sky shimmered against the slow-moving water. The surface had gone still again, as if the hollow's death had quieted the rage it once held. Morel knelt and touched the water with her fingertips. The ripples spread like whispers. "Something's waking up down there," she said. "It's not just waking," Amara replied. "It's remembering." Behind them, the wind shifted. A figure emerged from the trees. She was tall, robed in a gown of woven moss and moth wings, her eyes the same luminous gold as Morel's. Her hair was white, not with age, but with something older than time, and around her neck hung a locket identical to the one Amara had found in her mother's box. Zahara had worn one too. The woman stopped several paces away, watching them with the solemn grace of someone used to arriving after storms. "I felt the flames," she said. "You're late," Amara answered, rising to her feet. The woman didn't argue. "The past is thick here, too thick to cut quickly. But I came as fast as I could." "Who are you?" "I am the one who lit the last candle in Zahara's name," the woman said, "before it was drowned." Amara's breath caught. She hadn't known there were others. "You kept the flame," she whispered. "We kept it for you." The woman extended a hand, and the amulet around her neck opened with a soft click. Inside was a single black match, wrapped in a lock of braided hair and stitched into silk, a relic of a covenant long hidden. Amara stepped forward and accepted it. The flame within her pulsed in recognition. "The others will come for this," she said. "They already are," the woman replied. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and steady, not the sound of a storm, but hooves, war drums, the returning march of old enemies who had waited for the veil to crack. Amara turned to Morel. "Can you still hear them?" The girl's eyes fluttered shut, and she nodded. "More now. They're calling names I don't even know." "You will," Amara said. She looked to Khalil. He gave her a weary smile. "Guess we're not going home after all," he said. She smiled back, though it didn't reach her eyes. Home is gone. Behind them, the ruins of the hollow collapsed inward with a groan. The fire had finished its work, but the war was just beginning. The air tasted of soot and salt, heavy with the scent of endings. As they stood by the water's edge, the stillness of the marsh pressed in close, like something holding its breath. In the hush that followed, Morel stared down at her reflection, no longer just a girl's face, but something older, something forged. The light in her irises shimmered, flickering, like the last flame on a dying wick. "Are we safe?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "No," Amara said, "but we're alive." She reached down and cupped Morel's hand in hers. The girl's fingers were still cold, but they no longer trembled. Whatever spell had nearly broken her, she had survived it. And Amara had too. The hollow had wanted their pain, but it got their defiance instead. The woman in the mossed gown stepped beside them, silent as moonlight. There are more like her, children touched by Zahara's blood, by the first flame. "How many?" Amara asked. The woman tilted her head, eyes distant. "Enough to change the world. Enough to burn it down again." Khalil muttered a curse under his breath. "Always with the fire." "Fire's the only thing they ever listen to," Amara said. She turned to the woman. "You never gave me your name." "Names are dangerous, child. I've already burned 4 mine." The woman smiled faintly. "Then call me Lisselle." Amara nodded once. "You said you kept Zahara's flame. Then you know what she died for." "I do." "Good, because I'm not running from it anymore." Khalil scoffed softly. "We never were very good at running anyway." Amara stepped into the water. It soaked her boots, climbed her ankles, embraced her with a cold that bit like memory. Morel followed without hesitation. Lisselle moved as if she belonged to the current, every step weightless. Khalil hesitated the longest, his eyes trailing one last time over the remains of the hollow, before he limped in after them. The marsh began to glow, faintly, the way moss sometimes does in moonlight. But there was no moon. The red sky still reigned above, casting long shadows across the cypress knees. "Do you see that?" Morel whispered. "I see it," Amara said. Beneath the surface, something vast and ancient stirred. Not evil, not cruel, just old, watching, remembering. The salt marsh had secrets, it always had, but now it was opening its eyes again. Lisselle lowered herself into the water and pressed her palm flat to the surface. Ripples spread outward in concentric circles, and with them, images flickered. Faces of women long dead, flames carried on breathless winds. Blood spilled on doorsteps, runes etched into skin. A history written in wounds and rituals. "This is where the first flame was hidden," Lisselle said, "before they tried to drown it in salt." "Why here?" Amara asked. "Because it was the last place the blood still remembered." Morel stepped closer. "The voices, some of them are clearer now. I think one of them is her." Amara turned sharply. "Zahara?" "She's angry," Morel said, "but not at us." Khalil took a shallow breath. "Then who?" The marsh answered for them. A tremor passed beneath their feet. From the northern tree line, a scream echoed. Not human, not beast. Something in between. It curled around them like smoke. Morel flinched. "They're coming," she said. Amara clenched her fists, flame flickering between her fingers. "Let them." But Lisselle shook her head. "Not yet. The hollow's death will draw them, yes, but they'll wait until the veil thins completely." "And when is that?" "When the sky turns black again, and the last red light is swallowed." Amara looked up at the sky, which had been stained crimson since sunset. It wasn't natural. It was a wound, a waiting mouth, a promise of reckoning. "How long do we have?" Khalil asked. Lisselle's gaze fell on Narelle. "That depends on her." The girl looked from one adult to the other. "I didn't ask for this." No one ever does, Amara said gently. But we're here now. Mirel nodded slowly. Then I'll help you fight. But I want to know why the fire chose me. Lyselle turned to her. Because it remembers you. Because your name was once written in ash, long before you were born. And if I burn? Then you will burn beautifully, she said. Amara placed a hand on Mirel's shoulder. Not alone. The sun would rise soon, though not through the red veil. The night had not ended, but the waiting had. The hollow was gone. The salt was still. And in the middle of the marsh, 4 figures stood against the coming dark, together for the first time, and perhaps the last. They were flame-born, curse-marked, blood-sworn, and the sky would remember them. Chapter 20. The Night She Chose Me Again. Chapter separator. The candlelight flickered across the wood-paneled walls of the old fishing shack, casting long shadows that moved like memories. Amara sat at the edge of the cot, her boots unlaced, her hair still damp from the marsh. The storm had passed, leaving behind only the chorus of frogs and the hush of wind brushing against warped slats. Somewhere in the rafters, something creaked. It wasn't haunted, but it felt like it ought to be. She turned the bone-handled dagger in her lap, the curve of its blade still faintly stained with the hollow's blood. No matter how many times she wiped it clean, it never gleamed again. Maybe it didn't want to. Khalil sat in the far corner, resting against a stack of netting and battered fish crates. His ribs were wrapped in cloth strips, his knuckles cracked and healing. You should rest, he said without looking at her. We don't know when the next wave will come. I can't sleep, she murmured. You keep burning the wick at both ends, Amara. Eventually there's nothing left. She didn't reply. There was no point in lying, not to him. Her body was weary, sure, but her blood still moved like it was searching. The flame under her skin whispered, restless and alive. It had tasted purpose again. It wouldn't settle for silence. She's not the same, Khalil added. The girl. Mirel. Yeah, it's not possession, not exactly, but it's like something bigger's wearing her skin with her permission. Amara nodded slowly. Zahara's echo, her will still alive. The fire doesn't choose without intent. It never did. He reached for the old bottle beside him, took a long drink, and winced as it burned down. If this ends with us face down in the swamp, remind me why we came back. Because she called me. He raised an eyebrow. Zahara? No, she said quietly. Her. A beat passed. Then the door opened. Mirel stood in the doorway, bathed in pale moonlight. She looked older than she had an hour ago. Not in years, but in weight. The kind of aging born of grief, magic, and knowing too much too soon. Her curls were pulled back, revealing a mark at her neck. A faint burn, shaped like a flame inside a teardrop. Can I talk to you? She asked. Khalil rose, gave Amara a long look, and stepped outside without a word. Mirel crossed the room slowly, eyes scanning the dagger before meeting Amara's gaze. I saw my mother, she said, voice fragile as spider silk. In the water. She didn't speak, but I knew it was her. I knew by the way she watched me. She wasn't angry, wasn't proud either, just waiting. For what? For me to choose. The girl stepped closer. The air shifted around her. A soft heat shimmered, not fire, not quite, more like a spark, a warmth waiting to bloom. I was afraid I'd become her, Mirel said, that I'd lose myself to the flame. You haven't. I almost did. Amara reached out, took her hand. But you didn't. I stayed, she whispered. I chose me. Amara stood slowly, letting the dagger fall to the cot. That's what makes you stronger than her. No, Mirel said, eyes shining. It's what makes me like you. The words caught Amara off guard. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. Mirel stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her. Not like a soldier clinging to her general. Not like a child seeking a mother. Like someone anchoring herself in a truth she had nearly drowned in. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. You won't, Amara said, her voice breaking just a little. For a second, when the fire took me, I thought I was gone, like she'd swallowed me back into her. But then I heard your voice. The wind carried it. You told me I could come home. You did, Amara said softly. You chose to. I'll choose you again, every time. Amara closed her eyes, the weight in her throat thick and aching. It wasn't the fire that made her want to cry. It was this girl. This impossible, stubborn, luminous girl, who reminded her why she had survived. All this time, why she kept fighting. Outside, the wind shifted, a hollow moan weaving through the cypress. Amara knew it wouldn't last. Peace was temporary. The veil would thin again. The hollow's kin would crawl free. Zahara's enemies would rise. But in this small, stolen breath of calm, only one thing mattered. She had been chosen, not by the fire, not by Zahara, not by the ancient blood, but by Morel. And she would choose her back, always. Amara pulled away just enough to meet her eyes. Whatever happens next, I'm with you. Morel nodded, wiping tears with the back of her hand. Then we burn together. No, Amara said, the flame in her voice quiet and sure. We live. Outside, Khalil leaned against the shack's weathered siding, listening to the frogs in the distance and the gentle hush of the night. He felt the heat behind the door, but he didn't intrude. It wasn't his moment. It was theirs. And somehow, in a world full of haunted bloodlines, broken fire, and cursed marshes, that was enough. Amara lingered in the warmth of the embrace a moment longer, before she gently pulled away, brushing a curl from Morel's damp brow. Her fingers trembled faintly, not from fear, but from the weight of tenderness she rarely allowed herself to feel. Morel exhaled shakily, as if letting go of something she'd been holding in since the fire first answered her. Does it always feel like this after? Like what? Amara asked. Like you're still burning, but in a way that doesn't hurt. Amara smiled faintly. That's the part most don't survive long enough to understand. The flame isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's what lets us begin again. There was a brief knock at the door. Just 2 fingers, tapping wood. Khalil leaned his head in without stepping inside. Hate to interrupt the moment, but we've got company. East side of the grove. Movement through the reeds. Amara's body tensed. Morel's eyes widened. How many? Amara asked. 3, maybe 4. Not hollow, not veiled. Look human, but something's off. They're moving like they know exactly where we are. Amara bent and retrieved the dagger, slipping it back into the sheath at her thigh. Her face shifted, softness tucked away, resolve rising to the surface. Morel followed her lead, pulling her coat from the back of a chair and fastening it across her shoulders. Her fingers hovered briefly over the flame-shaped scar at her neck before she turned. Khalil was already moving. I'll circle wide. If they're scouts, I'll drive them toward the cypress wall. You two hold the shack. No, Amara said. We confront them together. Khalil frowned. You sure? I'm tired of waiting for the fire to come to us. This time, we step into it. Outside, the marsh shimmered silver beneath the moon. Mist clung low to the water's edge, drifting like lost souls too stubborn to pass on. Cypress branches bent with the memory of storms. They moved as one, Amara at the front, Morel just behind, Khalil flanking left as they approached the grove. The wind carried no sound but the crackle of grass and the hum of something wrong just beneath the earth. Then she saw them. 4 figures stood in the reeds, partially obscured by fog. Their bodies were still, but their eyes burned, a cold, unnatural gleam. Like moonlight caught in dead things. They weren't hollow, but they weren't clean either. Morel's breath hitched. Those marks, Amara saw them too, symbols carved into flesh, old and faded, but still pulsing faintly with residual power. the sigils of a forgotten order. The pale brand, necromancers. Not again, Amara hissed. One of them stepped forward, skin stretched too tightly over high cheekbones, mouth split in a mockery of a smile. "We come with an offering," he said. "You come with rot," Khalil muttered. The man tilted his head. "You carry the flame. We only wish to speak." "You don't speak," Amara said, raising the dagger. "You desecrate." The man's expression flickered, something sharp slipping through his false civility. "Then I'll offer you this instead. Your blood, given freely, or taken as tithe." Morel stepped forward, fire curling behind her irises. "You don't speak for the flame. You barely hold it, girl. I hold enough." With a whisper, the marsh lit orange, not a blaze, just a shimmer of heat in the air, rising from the mud itself, casting halos around the girl's silhouette. The leader of the pale brand flinched, and his men drew weapons, not of metal, but bone and spellbound ash. Khalil moved first, swift, brutal, a hook knife flashing across one man's neck before the spell could leave his lips. Morel raised her hand, and the heat surged outward in a dome, forcing the rest back. But the leader held steady. He reached inside his cloak, pulling forth something bound in sinew and thorns. A heart. Not beating, but not still either. Amara's stomach twisted. "That's her heart," she whispered. Morel turned sharply. "Who?" The man grinned. "The mother, the martyr, the fire witch, Zahara." Amara surged forward before she could think, blade aimed at the man's throat, but he vanished into mist. The others fell with the fire, owns cracking, screams drowned by the hiss of burning reeds. But the heart remained. It thumped once, loud, audible, wrong. Khalil stared down at it. He wanted us to see it, to know they have it. Morel's flame dimmed slightly. "They're not trying to stop us. They're trying to draw us." Amara looked at her. "And you're going?" Morel nodded. "I have to. She's not at peace. Not yet." Khalil sighed, wiping his blade. "Then I guess the swant's not done with us." Amara bent and picked up the heart, wrapping it in a cloth. It pulsed faintly against her palm, like something caught between life and memory, between flame and ash. "I swore I'd protect you," she said to Morel. Morel looked up at her, eyes steady. "Then stay with me, through the fire, through the end." Amara gave a slow, aching nod. To the end. Together, they turned toward the dark, and the dark opened to receive them. They didn't speak as they moved through the low brush, only the sounds of the swamp guiding them, the slow hush of water, the crackle of scorched moss beneath their boots, the hiss of something ancient retreating into the dark. The flickering afterglow of Morel's fire had faded, but not gone out. It hovered just beneath the skin of the world now, as if the marsh had decided to remember her. Khalil walked slightly ahead, his axe lowered, but ready, his silhouette sharp against the silver-laced mist. Amara walked beside Morel, her eyes never straying far from the girl. The heart, still wrapped in oilcloth, beat softly in Amara's coat like a cursed clock. They passed through the hollow root trees, where old witch marks still clung like moss to the bark, remnants of rites long broken but not forgotten. Amara's gaze snagged on a bundle of feathers and bone hanging from a branch. A ward, a warning. Someone had walked this way recently. "Khalil," she called low. "I see it." He moved to the base of the tree and knelt, brushing aside the wet leaves. Beneath them, a sigil had been carved into the mud, not with a blade, with a fingertip. Morel stepped beside him. "It's her mark." Amara nodded. "Zahara's." "Then why would she leave it here?" She didn't, Amara said, voice tightening. Someone else is using her name. Khalil stood. A trap or a trail? Morel looked between them, her fingers curling tightly into her coat sleeves. I want to follow it. Khalil glanced at Amara. She's barely survived one brush with that kind of fire. And now she wants to walk into the mouth of it again? Amara didn't answer immediately. Her fingers found the edge of the wrapped heart in her coat and held it like a question. The pulsing inside was weaker now, still steady, but fading, like something unsure whether it was supposed to still exist. She's right, Amara said. We can't turn away. Not if someone is trying to bind Zahara's power again. Not if they're dragging her spirit back through the veil. But we're not ready, Khalil argued. We need more than blades and bad memories. Amara's eyes burned. We don't have time to be ready. There was a silence after that. Then Morel stepped between them. I don't want her back, she said softly. I don't want her resurrected. I don't want her voice in my head again. But if someone's using her name, her power, her pain, I won't let it stand. I won't let her legacy rot in the hands of the pale brand. Khalil's jaw tightened. Then he gave a single, slow nod. Then let's make sure her name dies right this time. They followed the sigils deeper into the trees. At every turn, Zahara's mark reappeared, burned into bark, etched in ash, glowing faintly in the water's surface when the light hit just right. The farther they went, the colder the air grew. Not natural cold, but the kind that whispers behind your teeth and clings to your bones. Eventually, they reached the old clearing, a circle of blackened stumps, scorched decades ago during the first fall of the Flamekeepers. Amara hadn't been back here in years. The marsh refused to reclaim this place. Even the moss grew sparingly, like it remembered being burned. At the center of the clearing stood a woman, tall, hooded, robes of salt gray and iron thread. She didn't move when they approached, but she turned her head slightly, as if she'd known they would come. Amara Lovelace, she said. Her voice was low, ancient, and the girl who carries the breath of Zahara. Morel stepped forward, unflinching. If you know who I am, then you know not to stand in our way. The woman smiled, not cruelly, not kindly. I do not come to stand in your way, child. I come to warn you. Khalil laughed bitterly. You people and your riddles. Just say what you want. The woman ignored him. Her gaze lingered on Amara. The fire has shifted, she said. It no longer belongs only to the bloodlines. It chooses with new will now. You felt it the night she awoke. Amara nodded slowly. And you want what? To contain her? No. The woman pulled back her hood. She was older than Amara expected, wrinkled, but not frail. Her eyes were milky with cataracts, but the light in them still burned. Her neck bore the brand of a forgotten flamekeeper, a mark thought lost to history. I was Zahara's sister, she said, blood and bone. Morel's breath caught. You're lying. No, I was spared the night she fell, exiled by her own hand. I have lived in the swamp's silence ever since. Amara stepped forward, the heart heavy in her coat. Then why come now? Because her soul is restless, the woman whispered. And it is not just the pale brand who seek to claim her. There are others, old ones, veiled by time. And if they succeed, she looked at Mirel, you will not survive it. Mirel held the woman's gaze. Then teach me. The woman's smile deepened, not triumphant, not sad, just tired. You are already beyond teaching. What you carry is no longer mine to shape, but I can guide you. Khalil spat into the grass. We've trusted ghosts before. It didn't go well. This one is not a ghost, Amara said. She's the last living witness. The woman stepped aside. Behind her, a path began to form, branches folding back, moss glowing faintly like embers. Follow the flame, she said, but beware. It remembers every name it has ever burned. Amara looked once at Mirel. You ready? Mirel nodded, and together they stepped forward into the dark that remembered them. Chapter 21. Ash-sown roads. Chapter separator. The dark remembered them. It remembered Mirel's blood, the fire stitched into her breath, her skin, her mother's name echoing in the marrow. It remembered Amara's footsteps, the weight of choices made, the sorrow she carried like a second blade. And just beyond that darkness, deeper in the marsh where the moon did not reach and the frogs refused to sing, it remembered him. Malachi Lovelace stirred awake against the roots of an old gum tree, the wound at his side pulsing like it had grown a heartbeat of its own. The salve Eris had pressed into the cut was wearing off. He could feel the cold threading its way back into him. Not from the air, from the veil. He wasn't far from where they had crossed. He felt it. The shift, the ripple of flame in the stillness. Amara's flame. Mirel's too, now. The kindling of something new. Something terribly old. He sat up slowly, biting down a hiss as his muscles pulled against the scabbed edge of the wound. His hand drifted to the hilt of his knife, bone-handled, stained with hollow blood, and then to the clay talisman looped around his neck. It had cracked overnight. He hadn't dared touch it since. Something had changed. They were ahead of him. He could feel it. The fire had remembered them, and it hadn't forgotten him either. He rose to his feet. The sky above was wrong again. The stars blinked like dying candles, and the air smelled of burned cedar and grave-soaked salt. He took a step toward the thinning reeds, the water shallow and silent beneath his boots. His reflection looked back at him, a man half-shadowed, half-bound to something he didn't fully understand. His eyes looked older than they had in the mirror weeks ago. Maybe it was the years he'd tried to forget Amara. Maybe it was the memory of being left behind. But he wasn't here for jealousy. He wasn't here for second chances. He was here because something worse than the hollow was coming. And it had started calling names. He walked. Branches parted as if remembering him too. Trees leaned just slightly away. A deer carcass, long stripped, hung by a tangle of white reeds across a bent oak. Not a sound. No birds. No frogs. Even the wind seemed to wait. He heard her voice again, Amara's voice, carried not by echo but by memory. You ready? And then Mirel's, I'll choose you again. Every time. He clenched his jaw. The girl had become the fire. And Amara had become its keeper. But there were still pieces missing. Truths none of them could see clearly from inside the flame. He had seen it in the hollow's last vision. Zahara's sister was not dead. Valora, the mirror twin, the warborn, had survived. She had learned to lie low, to bury herself in broken names and whispers. And now she was returning. He had to reach Amara before the truth did. The path split near a half-sunken shrine. He went left, through the blood reeds, the clay talisman at his neck humming again like a slow, angry drum. Ahead, the shadows stirred. No longer passive, no longer patient. Somewhere nearby, Amara and Mirel were already moving forward into the teeth of it. He would catch up. Because fire chose, yes, but it also remembered. And Malachi Lovelace was not ready to be forgotten. The trees changed, not gradually, not with the natural bend of terrain or season. One breath, and they were the marshes Amara had known since she was a child. Cypress and willow, moss and shallow brackish water. The next, they were older, crooked, grayer, rooted in ash instead of soil. Bark peeled in long, curling strips. Some were scorched black, as if they'd survived a fire none of the living remembered. Others bled sap, the color of dried blood. Mirel slowed beside her. This wasn't here before. It was always here, Amara said quietly. We just weren't allowed to see it. The ground squelched beneath their boots, mud parting to reveal bones, small at first. Bird, rabbit, then larger. Long-limbed things with too many ribs and no skulls. The hollow had been through. Or what came before them. Amara touched the hilt of her dagger but didn't draw it. The flame in her veins had begun to stir again, not as a warning, but as recognition. This place was not foreign to it. This was memory. This was origin. They reached a clearing where no trees grew. At the center, the stone altar sank halfway into the earth, carved with spirals and flame marks. Some Zaharas, some older than even the Flame Mother's reign. A single object rested at the center, a mask. Morel stepped forward, drawn. "Don't touch it," Amara said sharply. Morel stopped, but her voice was small when she asked, "Do you know what it is?" Amara nodded slowly. It's her face, her first face, before she was Zahara, when she was just a girl trying to burn the world clean. Then why is it here? Amara didn't answer, because she didn't know, because it terrified her that something wanted Morel to see it. The mask was carved from bone, smooth and ivory pale, with no eye holes, just flame-scored markings around the brow, and a vertical tear etched down one cheek. A tear made of fire. Zahara had always worn pain like a weapon. "I dreamed of this mask," Morel whispered. "When the fire was pulling me under, I saw it, floating in the dark, watching me. She left it behind when she gave up her body," Amara said. "No one's supposed to find it." Morel looked at her. "Then why did we?" Before Amara could answer, the wind shifted. It didn't blow, it curled, coiled around their ankles, carried voices in its spiral. The veil breaks where names are forgotten. But the fire never forgets. Amara pulled Morel back instinctively. But the moment her fingers brushed the girl's shoulder, heat pulsed through them both. Not theirs, not Zahara's. Something colder, older. Across the clearing, shadows gathered. Figures emerged. Not hollow exactly. Not yet. They were malformed. Half-grown. Fire-touched but not consumed. One wore a crown of thorns. One had no mouth. One was just a child with black eyes and scorched fingers, dragging a string of teeth like prayer beads. They didn't attack. They only watched. Morel shuddered. "They're waiting." "For what?" Amara asked. "For her. For Valora." The name struck the clearing like thunder. Amara stared at Morel. "How do you know that name?" "I don't," she said softly. "But the fire does." Amara's heart pounded. She reached into her coat, pulling free the scorched map she'd taken from Zahara's sanctum weeks ago. The ink had begun to shift. Runes she couldn't read flared along the edge. Paths once hidden now drew themselves in flame. "She's drawing us in," Amara said. "The real war. It was never just about the hollow. Zahara started a fire. And Valora wants to finish it," Nirel said. The child figure at the edge of the clearing tilted its head. A flicker of light bloomed to the south, brief and blue, like a dying star in the dark. Malachi. Amara turned sharply toward the flash, her grip on the dagger tightening. She could feel him. Not near, but not far. Wounded. Not dead. Still moving. "You know who that was," Nirel said. "I do. Are we going after him?" Amara looked at the altar again. The mask, the watchers, the path ahead. "No," she said. "We're letting him come to us?" Amara shook her head. "We're going deeper, before Valora finds us first." Nirel hesitated, then stepped forward again. "Then let's burn the map into the road." Amara touched her fingers to Nirel's shoulder. Together, they stepped beyond the altar, into a path lined with ash trees and fire-etched symbols, the veil pulling thin around them. And behind them, the child with the black eyes lifted its face and whispered a name into the dirt. A name the fire remembered. A name Valora had been waiting for. The woods swallowed them whole. not like prey, not like something lost, like inheritance. The path did not wind, but sank, deeper, darker, until even the air tasted scorched. There was no wind anymore. Only the hush of ancient trees and the soft crackle of unseen embers in the distance. Mirelle kept her head high, though the heaviness in her steps said the fire inside her was weighing more now, remembering more. The further they went, the more the symbols on the trees pulsed faintly. Some flared at her passing, others dimmed. None ignored her. "This is where Zahara was born," Amara murmured. Mirelle looked up sharply. "In the flame?" "In the silence before the flame, before it had a name, before it had a mother." She paused, brushing a hand against one of the trees. "This place isn't marked on any map. It lives where memory settles after death." Mirelle frowned. "So how do you know it?" Amara's voice turned low. "Because I've been here before." She didn't explain further. She couldn't. She barely remembered it herself. Only that once, long ago, when the flame inside her was still new and aching. She had followed a dream to the ash path, and then the memory had been taken from her. Ahead, the forest broke, not into light, but into stone. A staircase descended from the roots of a tree older than breath. It was cracked, half swallowed by time, covered in flame markings, each one curling, spiraling, like they'd been written by grief. At the bottom stood a door, not made of wood or iron or bone, but of solid flame, blue and gold and flickering, but somehow still solid. Behind it, something pulsed, like breath, like heartbeat, like calling. Morel's hand lifted without thinking. The flame in the doorway reacted immediately, drawing backward like curtains pulled wide. No hinges moved, no ground shook, but still it opened, revealing darkness. Not black, not shadow, not cold, but the deep dark of something old and sacred and buried alive. Amara's chest tightened. "This is the last room she sealed." "Zahara?" Morel asked. Amara nodded. "And the only one she never wanted opened." They stepped through. The chamber inside was round and massive, carved into the belly of the earth. The walls shimmered with trapped heat, etchings etched in ash glass. In the center stood a pyre that hadn't burned in centuries, surrounded by 7 hollow statues. Each was shaped like a woman, hands raised, mouths open in silent scream. And behind the pyre, a mural, Valora. She was carved not as flame, but as wound, a woman of shadows, eyes like pits, fire bleeding from her ribs, as if she'd been broken open to let the world burn. And above her head, scrawled in looping ancient glyphs, "She who remembers what fire tries to forget." Morel stepped closer, her breath hitching. "She's not trying to return." "No," Amara whispered, realization sinking like ice in her gut. "She's already here." From the pyre, a single spark rose. It hovered in the air like a firefly. Then another, then 10, then 100. They drifted around Morel. Not hot, not cruel, but familiar. She turned slowly. Their memories. Amara stepped forward, watching the sparks flicker in and out of view. Each one showed a vision of Zahara as a girl, of Valora with fire in her mouth, of Morel before the choosing, standing in a field of dying sunflowers. "They're her memories," Amara said, "Zahara's and Valora's." A deep sound rumbled from the far wall. Not voice, not beast. Name. The mural trembled. Stone cracked. From the mouth of the Valora carving, black fire began to trickle. slow and elegant like ink. Morel turned, face lit by its glow. "I know this place," she said softly, "not because of Zahara, because of me." Amara's throat clenched. "What are you saying?" "I think I've been dreaming her dreams since I was a child. Not Zahara's, Valora's, the parts of her Zahara couldn't kill." The sparks circled faster now, drawn into Morel's chest. She didn't cry out. She didn't flinch. She opened her arms, and the fire went in. Amara reached for her, heart racing. "Morel." But the girl turned, eyes glowing faintly. "No," she said. "It's okay. This was always part of it. Zahara chose me to hold her will, but Valora, she left a wound in the fire itself. I think I was born from both." Amara stared, and then the statues moved. One stepped down from its pedestal, another followed. Not fast, not violently, like sleepwalkers waking in an ancient room. 7 flame-shaped spirits with hollow mouths and hands like scorched feathers, and all of them bowed before Morel. Chapter 22, The Pale Brand Unmasked, Chapter Separator. The flame-wrought statues knelt before Morel, but it wasn't submission in their posture. It was recognition, the kind that had nothing to do with reverence and everything to do with memory. Amara stood a step behind her, dagger drawn but unmoving, her pulse thundering in her ears. These were not spirits she could kill. They were echoes, stitched together from the ash of Valora's rage and Zahara's grief. Morel's arms slowly lowered as the fire within her chest quieted, no longer swirling, settling. One of the statues raised its hollow head. From its open mouth came not a voice, but a sound like embers stirring beneath bone. "She wears the brand," it whispered. Morel glanced to Amara, then down at her own hands. The skin beneath her collarbone pulsed faintly, as if responding to an unseen sigil. When she drew back her neckline, the scar, once a simple burn in the shape of Zahara's flame, had changed. Now it was threaded with silver, a pale halo wrapped around the fire mark like a second brand laid over the first. Amara stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "That's not just Zahara's mark anymore." Morel nodded, voice quiet. "It's hers, Valora's, or maybe what Valora left behind." The kneeling echoes raised their hands in unison. The stone chamber trembled. A soft light bled from the carvings along the wall, illuminating the mural. No longer just a portrayal of Valora in torment. A new form shimmered into view beside her, smaller, unfinished, a girl with eyes of fire and shadow. Amara's breath caught. She knew. She made space, Morel said, for someone to finish what she couldn't. The flames coiled tighter around Morel, then sank beneath her skin. Not possession, not punishment, acceptance, like ink seeping into paper. The memories of both flame mothers, the fire and the wound, merged in her veins. "I know what the pale brand is now," Morel whispered. "It's not just the mark of who gets chosen. It's the mark of who remembers everything the fire tried to burn away." One of the spirits stepped forward. From within its hollow chest, it pulled a mask, white as bone, etched with flame and tear, identical to the one Amara had buried long ago beneath a saltthorn tree. But this one breathed. Amara tensed. "That's the pale brand." "No," Morel said. "It's what's behind it." The spirit held it out to her, trembling. Morel didn't reach for it. "I don't want to wear it." "You already are," the spirits whispered together. A low rumble shook the earth. The mural cracked again, but this time it did not weep. It opened. A fissure split the chamber's far wall, revealing a long corridor filled with hanging lanterns. Each one held a sliver of silver flame, nothing like Zahara's red heat. These flames pulsed cold and quiet, but they felt heavier, as if each one carried a life. "Those are the names," Amara said, eyes wide. Morel stepped toward the hall. "The ones the fire remembers. Every one it ever burned, Amara whispered. And at the center of the corridor, on a stone plinth, lay a single scroll, sealed in wax, stamped with both sigils, the old brand and the pale one. Morel approached it slowly. The echoes did not stop her. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. The scroll unrolled itself, ink slithering into place. Names, pages of them. Generations, lineages lost and rewritten. Mothers and daughters, sisters and betrayers. Sahara's truth, Valora's silence, and between every name, a question. Who do you become when fire remembers you? Morel didn't speak. Her hand slid over the scroll, and her vision swam. The chamber around her faded, became smoke, became wind. And then she stood in a field. Golden light, sunflowers, and a woman barefoot, standing just beyond the last bloom. Not Sahara, not Valora. Herself, older, hardened, wearing no flame, no mask. Just the mark on her chest, glowing faintly beneath linen. The older Morel spoke without turning. You can still walk away. I know, the younger Morel replied. Then why stay? She took a breath. Because I remember. The older version nodded once, then faded like ash. When Morel opened her eyes, Amara was holding her, brow pressed to hers. You were gone for a second, she murmured. I wasn't. Morel's voice was steady now. I was home. Amara looked around. The statues were gone. The mural had vanished. Even the scroll had dissolved into cinders. Only the mark on Morel's chest still glowed with that silver-threaded flame. We need to leave, Amara said. This place is memory, but the hollow is real. And if Valora's truly awake, she's not alone anymore, Morel said. Neither are we. As they turned to leave, another figure emerged in the corridor, cloaked in ash, barefoot, face obscured by a veil of moth-wing cloth. But the mark on her hand, pale flame in the shape of a spiral, was unmistakable. Amara stepped forward. Mistress Sahara? The figure said nothing. Then slowly she lifted her veil. It wasn't Sahara. It wasn't Valora. It was someone new, with Morel's eyes, and the pale brand burned behind her like a crown. Amara drew her dagger before she even realized her hand had moved. The air had turned brittle, sharp with the scent of scorched roots and distant lightning. Morel took a breath, but no sound left her lips. She was staring into her own face, not mirrored, not twisted, but older, weathered, crowned in flame and silence. The figure stepped forward. Her bare feet made no sound against the stone. She stopped just short of the threshold and regarded them both with an expression that held no fear and no warmth, only certainty. Who are you? Amara asked. The woman tilted her head, and her voice emerged not as a whisper or a warning, but a reminder. I am what the fire dreamed of when it could no longer choose between vengeance and mercy. Morel's hands curled into fists. You're me. The woman nodded, a version, a possibility. She gestured gently to the smoldering path behind her. This chamber wasn't meant to crown a queen. It was meant to divide a lineage. Amara frowned. What does that mean? It means Zahara tried to pass on her will, but she could never burn out Valora's. So the flame split. It remembered both. It became both. She turned to Morel. And now, so have you. Morel's mouth was dry. If that's true, why are you here now? Because every time a pale brand awakens, a crossroads forms. Her voice dimmed. And you're standing at it. Amara stepped forward. So this is a test? The woman shook her head. No, it's a truth. One that cannot be carried forward until it's spoken aloud. The air thickened. Symbols ignited across the walls. Spirals, tears, feathers, flames. A tapestry of memory. And beneath their feet, the stone gave way to dust. A mosaic shattered, under the weight of names unspoken. In the center, two figures had been carved, one holding a torch, the other a knife. "You have Zahara's light," the woman said to Morel, "but you also carry Valora's wound. One is the power to guide, the other is the memory of everything lost along the way." Morel's voice was low. "Do I have to choose?" "No." She stepped closer. "You already did, when you came here, when you remembered." Morel's throat tightened. "Then why are you here?" The woman finally smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just tired. "To say goodbye." And with that, she touched Morel's chest. A pulse of silver light shimmered outward, not burning, not biting, a soft resonance, like wind across bone. Morel gasped. Images unfurled behind her eyes, her mother singing in the kitchen, Zahara's blade falling, Valora weeping in an unseen mirror, Amara's hands steadying hers in the night, and deeper still, visions of other lives she'd never lived, of daughters who'd run, of daughters who'd been lost, of daughters who had become fire and forgotten who they were. And then, stillness. The woman stepped back, veil fluttering around her once more. Her body was becoming flame now, dissolving into ash and smoke. "You don't need to wear the pale brand anymore," she said as she faded. "You are its voice now." Morel opened her eyes. The chamber was quiet again. The mural was blank. The scroll was gone. Only Amara remained, standing at her side, the blade lowered. "You all right?" she asked softly. Morel nodded. "I think I finally understand what she meant. Zahara didn't just want someone to carry her legacy. She wanted someone to witness it, to remember what was lost and what still burns." "And Valora?" Morel glanced at her chest. The mark was still there, but softer now, like a scar that no longer ached. She just wanted someone to know her name wasn't a curse. Amara smiled faintly. "And now what?" Morel turned toward the corridor where the ash trees once stood. "Now we go back." Amara blinked. "Back? To the marsh, to the veil, to whatever's waiting on the other side of this story." Together, they began to walk, the path behind them crumbling into memory as they went. Far above, through the thinnest crack in the earth, the moonlight broke in. And somewhere, in the dark, a creature made of hollowed-out flame opened its mouth and wept a sound that was almost a name. But not quite, because its name had been given back, to her, to Morel, to the one who remembered. They climbed the steps from the hollowed corridor in silence, passing through chambers where the air still shimmered with old firelight. The deeper truths of the pale brand had settled into Morel's bones like the slow cooling of steel. Painful, yes, but whole. She didn't feel split anymore, just heavy with meaning. Mara walked beside her with a wary calm. She'd seen power rise and break people before, watched the curse twist hearts into ash. But Morel hadn't cracked. She had chosen, and in choosing, she had survived. That made her dangerous. They breached the outer passageway just as the last sliver of moonlight pulled away from the marsh. The storm had passed, but the world still looked rinsed in grief. Ash clung to the wet grass like frost. Trees bowed. That thin, rotting membrane between the living and the not rippled visibly at the water's edge. "I remember this place," Morel whispered, scanning the half-drowned cypress roots. "So does it," Amara replied. The wind shifted. A soft sound echoed from deeper in the trees. A child's laugh, distorted by distance. Amara's hand went to her weapon out of habit, but Morel stopped her. "No blades. She's still out there," Amara said. "Valora's kin, the hollow who took the names. She won't come yet," Morel answered. "Not until she's sure which name I've chosen." A shadow moved across the water, subtle but sharp, like something remembering how to breathe. Amara eyed it carefully. What does she want now? She wants to see if I'm still afraid. And Morel wasn't. The marsh path wound forward, lined by moss-dripping trees and stones etched with forgotten glyphs. Some whispered as she passed. Names again. Names carved into bone and dirt. Not for memory, but for power. She didn't stop. She couldn't. Each step rewrote the ground behind her. Finally, at the clearing where Zahara had once stood, where Flame had kissed the world open, Morel stopped. She bent and pressed her palm to the earth. A warmth pulsed upward. The sigil on her chest echoed the touch. Amara stepped back, instinctively letting the girl take the center. Morel? But it wasn't just Morel who stood there. From the trees came the slow creak of something moving. Not branches, not animals. It was her, the hollow wearing Valora's memory like a shroud. Pale skin, blackened veins, eyes bottomless with hunger and loss. She walked barefoot across the wet ground as if it still belonged to her. The hollow woman stopped a few paces away and tilted her head. "You wear it well," she rasped. Morel stood. "I know who I am now." "Do you?" The hollow's mouth twisted into something almost like a grin. "Then say the name." Morel breathed deep. Not afraid, not wavering. Valora. The trees stilled. The hollow blinked slowly, the name striking something deep beneath her ribs. She hadn't expected to be seen. Not truly, not without malice. "I remember you," Morel said, "and I remember why you broke." The hollow lowered her gaze. "But I'm not here to fix you." "No," the woman murmured. "You're here to outlive me." "I'm here," Morel corrected, "to choose something new." With that, she turned, not waiting for the hollow to speak again. Because the fire no longer answered to the past alone. It burned forward, towards something unnamed. Amara caught up to her, voice low. "She let you go. She didn't have a choice." The veil parted ahead, fluttering like breath. Beyond it, the marsh waited, but so did the rest of the world. As they passed through, Morel looked back once. The hollow still stood there, a figure wrapped in sorrow, unmoving. But there was no rage in her face now, only release. And far in the distance, from the child with black eyes who had whispered her name into the dirt, Valora's name, the silence finally broke. Not in a scream, not in a curse, but in a song. A lullaby, once sung by fire to a child who would become the one thing it never dared to be: free. Chapter 23, Blood Tithes and Bone Songs, Chapter Separator. The veil closed behind them like a breath held too long. Morel didn't look back. The marsh welcomed her not as a child returned, but as something older, something named. A hush rolled through the trees, like even the water knew what had passed. Amara walked beside her, boots thick with mud and silence. Every step forward felt like it echoed with the weight of the women who came before them. They didn't speak until they reached the water's edge. Moonlight skimmed the surface, revealing the silhouette of the old pirogue half sunken in reeds, the same one Amara had once used to flee the marsh as a girl. It waited, still and open-mouthed, like something expecting an offering. "Do you think she's still watching?" Morel asked, voice low. "Valora?" Morel shook her head. "Zahara." Amara nodded. "She watches through the flame. Always did. But it's your voice it listens to now." Morel said nothing. She stared at her reflection in the black water. The pale brand shimmered faintly on her skin, like a tattoo made of memory. Not glowing, not burning, just there. "Will it ever leave?" she asked. "No," Amara said softly, "but it will stop hurting." A rustle broke the quiet. Not a hollow, not a beast, a child. He stepped out from behind the hanging moss, barefoot, ribs visible, eyes wrong. They were too black, too deep, like the marsh had poured itself into him. "You left us behind," the boy said. "You took her name and forgot the price." Morel turned to face him. No, I paid it. The boy's mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was older, wetter, like bones being stirred in a flooded grave. Then give us the psalm. Amara stiffened. Don't. But Morel raised her hand. It's all right. I know it now. She stepped forward and knelt beside the boy. The pale glyph on his throat pulsed as she reached out and touched his brow. He shuddered, not from pain, but from remembrance. And then she sang. Not Zahara's war hymn, not Valora's lament, a new song, made from both. It began as a hum, low and circular, like reeds swaying underwater. Then came the words, not in any tongue known to the living, but in the old rhythm, the marrow speech, words the fire once whispered to the bone. A lullaby and a reckoning. The boy fell to his knees. The glyph peeled away from his skin in strands of light and ash. And when it was done, he looked up, and he was just a boy again. Tired, alive, mortal. He wept. Amara caught Morel as she staggered back. Amara knelt with Morel cradled in her arms, listening to the steady, slowing thud of her heart. The fire had spent itself inside her, but the heat hadn't vanished. It had folded inward, like a coal hiding in the belly of the girl who'd just rewritten the oldest curse the marsh had ever known. Khalil emerged from between the trees, crossbow slung over his back, hair slicked with sweat and swamp water. I felt it, he said. Something peeled away, like a fever breaking. Amara nodded. She sang them free. She nearly broke herself doing it. She didn't, Amara said, brushing Morel's hair back from her brow. She held. The girl stirred, groaned, and opened one eye. You're loud, she mumbled. Khalil let out a low laugh. Guess she's fine. Morel sat up with Amara's help. No dreams this time. Just quiet. It's strange. That's what peace sounds like, Amara said. You'll get used to it. I don't think I will, Morel said honestly, and she looked around at the dark water and the flame's afterglow fading into memory. But I'll carry it. Behind them, the boy she'd freed had disappeared. Whether he'd returned to his people or simply faded like the others, they didn't know. But the air didn't feel as heavy. The marsh didn't feel like it was waiting to feed anymore. Still, something lingered. The kind of quiet that followed a name left unspoken. Khalil asked. We head north, Amara said. The pale brand didn't end here. Zahara left other scars. There's not much left north of the marsh, he said. There's enough, Morel said. I saw it. When I touched him, when I sang. A chain of places like this one. Old covenants, hidden shrines. Her blood runs deep. And not just hers, Amara added. Valora's name was whispered. She's waking. Khalil swore under his breath. She won't come quietly. No, Amara said. She never did. They walked until dawn, following the glowing remnants of the flame trail before it extinguished completely. The path curved along a ridge of dry land, past a stand of weeping cypress that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. The trees leaned inward, whispering to each other in bark and breath. At the end of the path stood a ruin, a broken chapel, half swallowed by vines and time. The sigil carved into its door had been scratched out, defaced, burned over. But faintly, Morel could still make it out. A crescent flame, a cradle, a fang. This was a temple to the pale brand, she said. Amara nodded. And something else. They stepped inside, Khalil staying at the threshold. The air was thick with soot and salt. Charred bones lay scattered across the cracked stone floor. At the far end, an altar stood, broken in half. Blood stained its edges. Old, black, stubborn. Morel moved toward it and touched her fingers to the stone. They came away warm. She was here, she said. Not just once. She ruled from this place. She bled this place, Amara corrected. That's different. Beneath the altar, a trapdoor remained. Half buried in moss and dust, they uncovered it together. The space below reeked of ancient brine and dried herbs. A chamber. Low ceiling. Walls etched with prayers, curses, and names. Some were scrawled by desperate hands, others carved deep with the intention of permanence. Mirelle ran her fingers across them. I know these, she whispered. They're yours now, Amara said. No, they're ours. Mirelle turned and looked her in the eye. I was never meant to carry this alone. Neither were you. Amara's throat tightened. She didn't speak. At the back of the chamber, something pulsed behind a wall of bone-latticed iron. Khalil finally entered, drawn by the change in the air. That's not a relic, he said. That's alive. The iron gave way with a push. Inside was a cocoon, not insect, not animal, not spellwork. Something in between, wrapped in silk strands of blood thread and memory moss. From within, a pulse beat in rhythm with Mirelle's. She stepped closer. Do you know what it is? Khalil asked. I think it's a piece of Zahara. A body part, he said, wrinkling his nose. A memory, a tether, a vow that was never fulfilled. You sure you want to touch that? Mirelle didn't answer. She placed her palm against the cocoon. It shattered like glass soaked in sunlight. A figure fell forward, not a woman, not a child, not yet formed. It landed in her arms, breathless, boneless, eyes wide and glowing with heat. And then it breathed, once, twice. Then it screamed, not in pain, but in the sound of being remembered. The figure was a child, a girl, no more than 6 or 7. Black eyes flecked with gold, skin pale and warm like fire-lit clay. She looked up at Mirelle, blinking. Are you my mother? She asked. Mirelle shook her head. No, but I remember her. I don't remember anything, the child said. Amara stepped beside them. That's okay. You don't have to remember to belong. Khalil muttered a curse and turned away. We are in deep now. But Mirelle smiled softly. This is the tithing. Not blood, not flame. Memory. You think she's Zahara? Amara asked. I think she's what Zahara left behind when she tried to forget herself. The child looked between them. What's my name? Mirelle touched her brow gently. You'll choose it when you're ready. They wrapped her in a cloak and left the chamber. As they emerged from the temple, the dawn had broken fully. Sunlight spread across the marsh. Not harsh, not judging, but quiet and new. The fire didn't rise to meet it. Instead, the flames slept beneath the moss, beneath the soil, beneath the names once etched in rage. Amara took Mirelle's hand. The child took her other. Behind them, Khalil walked in silence, eyes scanning the tree line. He didn't believe the peace would last. Neither did Amara. But for the first time, they didn't walk alone. Ahead, the land opened, uncharted, raw, full of old bones and older promises. There would be others like the temple, others waiting for the flame's truth, others bearing the pale brand still burning. But now they carried something stronger than fire. They carried each other. And whatever lay ahead, Valora's vengeance, Zahara's forgotten sisters, or the bone-sawing still unsung, they would not face it alone, because together they had begun the undoing, not of a curse, but of a legacy that no longer served them. And that was enough to start a war, or end one. The wind over the marsh was different now. It didn't hiss or groan. It carried no warnings, no whispered names. It simply moved, soft, cool, uncertain. Like it, too, was waking up from something long and heavy. Mirelle tightened the cloak around the girl's small shoulders. The child's hair had begun to dry in soft waves, curling like flame-touched reeds. She didn't say much, only walked beside Mirelle in step, as though she had always been part of them and simply forgotten. Are we going to the next place now? The girl asked. Her voice was high but calm. We are, Morel said. There's more to find. More of me? Morel looked at Amara, then back down. Not exactly, but maybe pieces of her, of Zahara, of what she left behind. Will I disappear when we find them? Amara knelt before her. You're not a ghost, little one. You're real. You were made real when someone remembered you. That's a powerful kind of magic. The child blinked, then nodded. Okay. They traveled north, skirting the old broken trail where the mangrove roots arched like ribs and the water lapped softly against half-buried ruins. The fire had marked this path once, but now it had gone quiet. Not gone, just resting, waiting. Khalil walked in front, cutting through brush and checking for signs of Holokin. He didn't speak much, but when he looked back at the girl, there was a softness there, uneasy but present. He'd fought monsters for half his life. He wasn't sure how to walk beside a miracle. They made camp that night, beneath a lean-to of woven branches and hanging moss. Myrelle took first watch, sitting just beyond the firelight with the bone-handled dagger laid across her lap. The child slept between her and Amara, curled like a question. You're quiet, Amara said when she joined her. I keep thinking about what the girl asked. If she'll disappear. She won't. But we might, Myrelle said. Bit by bit, if we keep touching these things Zahara left behind, her relics, her grief, her memory, what if it eats us? Amara leaned back against the tree, arms folded. Then we give it something it can't consume, something it doesn't know what to do with. Like what? Joy? Mercy? Laughter? Any of it? Myrelle smiled faintly. That's not in Zahara's memory. That's exactly the point. A twig snapped in the dark. Amara's hand moved to her knife without a sound. Khalil stepped into the light a moment later, crossbow ready. We've got company, he said. 4, maybe 5, moving slow, trying not to be noticed. Scouts? Amara asked. He shook his head. No, pilgrims. Maybe Holokin who broke free. They're humming something. Bone song. Myrelle stood, waking the girl gently. We need to see them. They moved toward the sound, keeping low. Around a bend in the trail, the marsh widened into a hollow shaped like a bowl, where 5 figures stood in a half-circle, each wearing veils soaked with ash. One carried a staff topped with carved antlers. Another held a bowl of coals, glowing faintly in the dusk. When they saw Amara, they did not run. They knelt. You carry her scent, the one with the antlers said. You bear her mark, but you are not Zahara. No, Myrelle said, stepping forward. I'm her echo, her answer, and her question. Another added. Amara narrowed her eyes. What are you doing here? We came seeking the girl who sang the bone song backward. Khalil's fingers twitched near his weapon. That was her. The pilgrims rose slowly. She undid the curse. She altered the flame's path. She called us by name. The one with the coals stepped forward, eyes wet with awe. And the hollow inside us slept. You were cursed? Myrelle asked. The woman nodded. Not all of us fell fully. We were in between. Not kin, not free. But when your voice rose, the coil loosened. The child peeked from behind Amara's leg. Are they like me? No, little one, said the veiled woman gently. You were born clean. We are unlearning our rot. What do you want from us? Amara asked. To serve, said the one with the antlers. To follow the true fire. Myrelle hesitated. We don't know where this road ends. It ends, the woman said, where the last song is sung. Myrelle's skin chilled. The bone song has verses we haven't heard yet. You will. That night, the pilgrims stayed at a respectful distance. humming softly as they rested. Their presence didn't feel threatening. It felt like the beginning of something much older than loyalty, like kinship blooming late in the season. Mirelle sat again with the child beside her, watching the smoke rise toward the canopy. "What are you thinking?" Amara asked her. "I think she'll need a name soon," Mirelle said, looking down at the girl curled in sleep. Amara smiled. "What would you choose?" "I won't choose for her." "You already did, when you remembered her." Mirelle thought of that moment. The cocoon, the pulse, the scream. She thought of the flames that sang through her blood, and the names etched in the shrine below. Then she leaned close and whispered something into the girl's hair. A promise, not a name, but something a name could grow from. When dawn came, the marsh did not greet them with dread, but with a stillness that felt earned. The pilgrims walked ahead of them now, veils fluttering. The way forward bent northward, toward hills long forgotten by maps. The bone song was not finished, and somewhere in those hills, the next verse waited. So did Valora. So did war. But they had chosen one another. And sometimes that was the first spell. The oldest magic, the beginning of the end, and the rebirth after. Chapter 24. The veil hung low. Chapter separator. The hills bled smoke. Not from fire, not this time, but from something deeper, older. The kind of smoke that rose from forgotten altars and breathless names, from rites that had no end. It twisted between the ash-blanched trees and settled low over the hollow, moving like fog, but carrying the scent of memory. Mirelle stepped carefully between two cracked stones, her hand curled tightly around the bone-handled dagger at her side. Each footfall left no sound, but the ground remembered her. A hush followed her, thick, reverent, as if the marsh itself knew what she carried now. Amara walked beside her, cloak drawn tight against the shifting air. She hadn't spoken in a while. Neither had Khalil, who brought up the rear, watching the veiled pilgrims ahead of them with wary eyes. The five had not said much since the night before. They simply moved with certainty, their path bending northward, as though guided by a map no one else could see. Behind them, the girl Zahara's echo made flesh walked without fear. Her bare feet kissed the mossy trail without hesitation. Her dark curls bounced softly with each step, and though her lips stayed closed, Mirelle could feel something stirring in her. A hum that matched the land, a rhythm that pulled on the thread of every hidden song beneath their feet. The deeper they went, the thinner the veil became. It shimmered now, barely holding shape in places. Pale stretches of air where sound changed pitch, where light bent and returned in unfamiliar hues. At the ridge of one hill, Mirelle paused and reached a hand toward one of these thin places. It felt like breath, cool, damp breath, exhaled from the mouth of something vast and unseen. "She's watching," Amara murmured beside her. "Valora?" Mirelle asked. Amara nodded. "Her scent is on the wind. Her eyes are in the dusk. She's close. Then she knows we're coming. She's counting on it." The veil dipped lower as they continued. What once shimmered above the treetops now brushed their shoulders, skimmed their faces like cobwebs of light. One of the veiled pilgrims faltered when it touched him, clutching at his chest and gasping, before steadying himself. "She's thinning it," he rasped. "The Hollow Queen." Khalil stepped closer to Mirelle, voice low. "She's not just thinning it, she's twisting it. These folds, they don't belong." Amara crouched at the base of a fallen branch, fingers trailing over symbols carved long ago into its bark. "These are tethers," she said, "anchors left to hold the veil in place. Valora's cucking through them." "Why?" Mirelle asked. "To force convergence," Amara said. "To bring all the voices together, old and new, blood and bone. She wants them to scream as one." The child stepped between them and laid a hand on the carved wood. Her fingers glowed faintly. Then a symbol pulsed and quieted. "No," she said gently. "We don't scream." The branch crumbled, not into rot, but into light, falling like snow and vanishing before it touched the ground. Amara stared at her. What did you do? I remembered it a different way, she said. I think that's how we fix the path. They continued into the hollow. Here, the trees grew further apart, their roots weaving beneath them like a net stretched taut. Old bones lay half buried in the peat, some arranged in circles, others scattered as if thrown by a great hand. The pilgrims slowed, murmuring prayers as they passed a ring of charred stones. This is where they first sang the bone song, one said. Khalil scoffed quietly. Cheerful place. Morel stepped into the center of the ring. The air was colder there, still, not with absence, but anticipation. She knelt and touched the ground. The whisper came immediately. Morel. She flinched. Amara moved toward her, but Morel held up a hand. Another whisper. Daughter of the unburned, keeper of the cinder name. The voice was not Zahara's. It wasn't Valora's. It was older, fainter, a remnant, a lingering. I hear you, Morel said quietly, but I'm not yours. You carry us. I carry what I choose. Then choose well. The voice faded. Morel stood and turned to Amara. We're not the first to walk this road, and we're not the last. Whatever Valora's trying to do, she's not alone. There are things on the other side of the veil, things older than fire. Amara's jaw tightened. Then we'll burn them too. They reached the far edge of the hollow by nightfall. The pilgrims stopped as one, veils fluttering in the soft wind. Ahead lay a stone gate, buried chest deep in the swamp. It was broken in two, as though something had torn its top half away. A black chain hung from one remaining post, sunk deep into the earth. Threshold, one whispered. The old border. Between what and what? Khalil asked. Between the living flame and the bone-deep memory. Amara stepped forward. The child walked beside her, eyes shining. This is it, Morel whispered. Beyond here, the veil won't hold. It already doesn't, Amara said. Then they all heard it, a sound beyond sound, like a note plucked from a harp made of marrow and regret. It didn't echo. It didn't fade. It simply lodged itself in their chests, vibrating quietly. The bone song's next verse had begun, and somewhere beyond the threshold, Valora sang it. The bone song threaded through them, not a melody, not truly, but a vibration, a presence. It unspooled inside Morel's chest like a memory long buried and now clawing its way out. It didn't hurt, but it unsettled, like hearing someone whisper your name in a room you believed empty, like recognizing your own reflection and not trusting it. Khalil grunted, pressing a palm to his sternum. It's in the marrow, he muttered. Amara hadn't moved. Her eyes were fixed beyond the broken stone gate on something none of them could yet see. Valora doesn't need an army, she said. She only needs to call them. The dead? Morel asked. No, Amara replied softly. The forgotten. Beyond the threshold, mist slithered along the ground, coiling through tree roots and sinking low into the black reeds. The moon overhead had dimmed, as if veiled by smoke. But the smoke didn't rise from any fire they could see. It came from beneath, from the earth itself. The pilgrims had fallen to their knees. One of them tore away his veil and began weeping silently. Another whispered a word over and over in a language Morel didn't understand. The child only watched them, eyes solemn. We can't turn back, Morel said. We passed that line when we crossed the hollow. Khalil said grimly. Amara reached out and touched the broken gatepost. The stone shivered under her fingers. I remember this, she said, her voice faint. When I was small, before my mother fell, there was a gate like this on the edge of the marsh. But the chains didn't hang. They were taut, sealed, keeping something in. What changed? Morel asked. Amara looked at her. The chains broke, and Zahara was the one who heard the song first. The child stepped forward, placing both hands on the stone. This time, there was no glow, only stillness. "She's listening," the girl said. "To see if we'll sing back." "We won't," Amara said. Morel looked up at the night sky. It was dark now, so dark that not even the stars pierced through. It felt as though the sky itself had been devoured. She turned toward the broken path ahead. "We have to keep going." Amara hesitated, then nodded. "Stay close to me." They crossed the threshold. The moment they did, the temperature dropped. Not to cold, but to silence. A thick, oppressive stillness wrapped around them like a burial shroud. The veil wasn't thin here. It was fractured, splintered into jagged pieces that drifted in and out of sight. Sometimes they glimpsed things through the breaks: faces, bones, a cathedral drowned in roots, a woman in white whose shadow moved faster than her body. Morel felt the dagger in her hand grow warm. The bone handle pulsed. "I think it knows this place," she whispered. "They all do," Amara said. "The relics, the old tools, they were forged in the presence of what lies beyond." "What lies beyond?" Khalil asked. "The place before forgetting." They passed under an arch of twisted trees. Beneath their roots were fragments of masks, ceramic and bone, painted with ash and ochre. Some had teeth, others empty eye sockets. One bore the sigil of Zahara's line, carved deep enough that blood once pooled inside the grooves. And then, ahead of them, a light. Not fire. It was pale, cold. It moved like it breathed. The pilgrims stopped. Morel stepped forward cautiously. "Is that?" But the light moved and it spoke, not with words, but with a hiss of breath and bone. The sound scraped the air, and suddenly the smoke parted, to reveal a figure seated atop a throne of woven antlers and bark. Velora. Her hair hung like spider silk around her face. Her skin was the color of grave wax, eyes like polished obsidian. She wore no crown. She didn't need one. The throne pulsed beneath her, alive and breathing. Around its base, the bones of the forgotten shifted and curled like the limbs of sleeping children. "Daughter of the unburned," Velora said, her voice cutting through Morel's mind like frost. "You walk in shadow, wearing flame." Morel took a breath and stepped closer. Amara moved with her. "I'm not here to kneel," Morel said. Velora smiled faintly. "No, you've come to choose. That is the oldest law." "I've already chosen." "Then choose again. That is the truest curse." Amara's hand tightened around her blade, but Velora's eyes flicked toward her, and the blade turned to black rust in her grip. Amara dropped it with a hiss. "You walk in her echo," Velora said. "You stink of Zahara's fury. Her fire never cooled." "I don't need it to," Amara said, eyes blazing. Velora rose from her throne. The air thickened. Morel's ears rang. "When the veil hung low," Velora said, "we sang to it. We fed it names and memories, and it loved us. But then your bloodline silenced it, with fire, with flame." She stepped forward. "I only want to sing again." "You want to unmake the boundary," Morel said, "to bring everything forgotten into the living world." Velora cocked her head. "Why should the dead be silent?" "Because they aren't finished," Morel said, "and the living deserve to choose." Velora's smile faded. "So be it." The ground split open beneath them, not violently, but like something exhaling from the deep. Smoke rose, the bone song swelled, and as Velora vanished into the smoke, her final words echoed like a lullaby drowned in sorrow. "The flame remembers, but the bone forgives." Morel turned to Amara. "We need to find the place the song was born." "And end it," Amara said. "No," Morel replied. "Sing it true. The smoke coiled like ink in water. Dense and weightless. Morel blinked through the gray, one hand outstretched until she felt Amara's grip tighten around hers. Khalil's form flickered in the mist like a figure lost behind memory. Somewhere behind them, the pilgrims remained still, half praying, half mourning, unsure whether they were at the end of something or its beginning. The throne, Amara murmured. It wasn't just made of bones. No, Morel said. They were bound into it, like a vow you couldn't unspeak. Khalil emerged beside them, his eyes rimmed red, not from tears, but from the pressure in the air, the weight of grief long unwept. She called us daughters of the unburned, he said, voice low. She meant it as a curse, Amara answered, but it's a truth. They moved forward, the ground shifting beneath them, like walking on ancient ribs. The path was barely visible now, littered with sigils carved into the dirt, some burned, others bleeding ash, as if they'd been freshly written by unseen hands. The bone song had quieted, but its rhythm still thudded faintly inside Morel's chest. "What is she trying to make me remember?" Morel asked. "She said the flame remembers every name it has burned. But what about the ones it didn't?" Amara slowed. "Not every wound comes from fire. Some come from forgetting." They came to a clearing where the mist thinned into a glimmering edge, like a cracked mirror held to the sky. The veil shimmered, thin as frost glass, and through it they saw flickers of the past. Zahara kneeling at an altar of salt and iron, her mouth open in silent scream, a child with flames in her hands, reaching for a mother who didn't turn around, and Amara, young, wild-eyed, dragging a blade through mud-thick blood, her shadow split in two. Khalil stepped back. "That's not illusion." "No," Amara said. "That's the veil's memory, and it's bleeding through." The mirror cracked. Morel reached forward and laid her hand against it. It was warm, not fire warm, but alive. It pulsed under her palm like breath caught in stillness. "Can I undo it?" she asked. "Valora, she thinks I'm like her. But I'm not." "She doesn't think that," Amara said. "She hopes for it." The veil opened. No wind, no sound, just a quiet unraveling, a seam parting in a dress too old to stitch again. And on the other side, a stairwell spiraled downward into red-lit dark. "She made a way for us," Khalil said bitterly. "We're walking straight into her hand." "No," Morel said. "We're walking into our past." They descended. The steps were carved from saltstone, etched with sigils that pulsed faintly beneath their feet. As they moved deeper, the air grew thicker, not heavy with heat or cold, but with memory. Morel felt her limbs grow sluggish, her mind stretch thin, like it was being pulled backward and inward at once. "She's testing us," Amara said. "The veil is sifting." "Sifting what?" Khalil asked. "Truth." They reached the base of the stairwell, where a massive chamber opened, wide as a cathedral, roofed with roots and bone and blackened flame marks. In the center stood a basin filled with water that shimmered like molten moonlight. And above it, etched into the air itself, hovered a name, Valora. But beneath it, flickering faintly, another, Morel. Amara stepped forward, circling the basin. This is where the first echo of the song was cast. "It wasn't sung," Morel said slowly. "It was wept." She knelt at the basin. The reflection staring back wasn't hers. It was Zahara, younger, still whole, holding something, a child, wrapped in linen and flame-kissed silk. And behind her, Valora watched. "She was there," Morel whispered, "when I was born." Amara's eyes widened. What? She wasn't just a threat to Zahara. She was family. The truth hit like a shudder through the stone. She was Zahara's sister, Morel breathed. The basin rippled violently, and the chamber groaned. Khalil stepped back, drawing his weapon. What does that make you? Morel stood. It makes me both of them, and neither. The veil surged. The image vanished, the water boiling away into mist. The sigils on the walls ignited with pale flame. From the shadows beyond, a whisper grew. She wanted you to know, Amara said, before the final choosing. Why now? Morel asked. Why let the truth bleed through? Because she doesn't need to fight us if we break ourselves. But Morel didn't tremble. She turned toward the chamber's far side where another gate waited, this one unbroken, sealed with bone latches and a glyph in blood. She thought I'd fall apart, Morel said. But I'm not a child of just one legacy. She pressed her palm to the gate. I'm what comes next. The bones creaked, the glyph pulsed, and with a low moan, the door began to open. The bone gate groaned as it split inward, each latch unhooking, like an old breath exhaled too late. Morel kept her palm steady against the glyph until the last lock released, and the thick door cracked open to a space beyond that smelled of soot and lilies, decay sweetened by memory. Khalil raised his blade, slow, deliberate. I don't trust any place that invites us in after all that. Amara stepped beside Morel, her voice low. She wants something. We don't walk into her mouth unless we know how to cut our way back out. The chamber beyond the gate glowed faintly, not with torchlight or flame, but with the soft, sullen luminance of old fire, trapped in glass. The walls shimmered with embedded fragments, teeth, hair, even bits of song, literal bits of song, etched, recorded in thin silver threads that moved along the stone like veins, pulsing with forgotten voices. Morel stepped through the threshold first. She didn't hesitate. Her heart thudded. Yes, but it was not fear that moved in her. It was purpose and the undeniable pull of knowing. The veil had remembered her name. Now she would remember its. The chamber narrowed into a spiral corridor, its ceiling low and curved, like they walked through the inside of a giant serpent's ribcage. Sigils burned softly along the floor, each one brightening beneath Morel's feet and fading behind her. Amara followed close. They called her the Veiled Oracle once, before she became the Pale Brand. She carved that title from someone else's blood, Khalil muttered. Everything she has, she took. She's not the only one who's taken things, Morel whispered. Her fingers grazed one of the glass walls as she walked, and a memory flickered into being, like a bubble rising from still water. A girl with hair like spun cinders ran barefoot through a field of ash. She was laughing. Behind her, two women, one in scarlet, the other veiled in white, argued without sound. Their hands moved, their eyes sparked. Then the woman in red took the child's hand, and the veil turned away. It faded. That was me, Morel said, and them. She gave you up, Amara said. She never wanted to. Morel didn't sound bitter, just resolved. They emerged into a smaller chamber, circular and humming, its center sunken in a perfect basin lined with obsidian. In the middle, seated upon a throne made of layered veils and flame-bleached bones, sat Valora. She did not rise. She didn't need to. Her eyes were pitchless voids. Her smile was neither cruel nor warm. It was a blade drawn halfway, waiting to finish its arc. So, Valora said, her voice like breath spoken through ancient silp. You remember. Morel nodded. You were my aunt, the one Zahara never named. Valora's fingers tapped once on the arm of her throne. She didn't name me because she was afraid of what I'd become. She feared what I carried. The truth. The flame does not grant power. It demands sacrifice. You used to believe in her, Amara said, stepping forward. You followed her. I did, Valora admitted. And when she turned her back on the oldest laws, on the bone songs, on the fire that came before the flame, I turned on her. You betrayed her, Khalil snapped. Valora's smile deepened. I kept the balance. Zahara taught you to wield is a weapon, yes, but it was once a keeper of memory, of legacy. It burned only those who broke the oath. Morel's voice shook, but she didn't flinch. Then why burn children? Villages? Why send the hollow after us? To see who would survive, Valora whispered. To see if you would rise, if you would remember what was taken from us. I remember now, Narelle said. Do you? Valora leaned forward. Do you remember your father's name? Morel's breath caught. Amara turned to her sharply. You said he died before. She never told me his name. Valora's lips parted, and for the first time, her voice was gentle. Because he was mine. The silence that followed hollowed the air. Even the flames in the wall glass froze mid-flicker. You lie, Amara breathed. I don't need to, Valora said. She took him from me, as she took everything. And when you were born, she buried the truth beneath flame and silence. You are not just her daughter, Morel. You are mine as well. That's not how blood works, Khalil said sharply. No, Valora said. But oaths and fire are thicker than blood. Morel staggered back, eyes wide. That means, Valora stood slowly, veil drifting like fog, that you are the legacy of both flames, the one that guards and the one that consumes. You can end this war, or you can start something even older. I won't be your weapon. I never asked you to be, Valora said, but you came all the same. Behind them, the veil trembled. The door began to close. Amara reached for Morel's hand, but the girl didn't take it. I need to know, Morel said, if the fire still recognizes me, all of me. She stepped forward toward Valora. The basin pulsed red. The throne's bones creaked. The breath in the room seemed to vanish. Extended her hand, then take it. Let the flame see all of you. Let it choose. Morel hesitated, and then she reached. But just before her fingers touched Valora's, a voice broke the air, hoarse, alive, defiant. Don't. A shadow flared at the edge of the chamber. A figure stepped through the veil before it sealed. His coat torn, his face blood-streaked but unbroken. Malachi. He was soaked in blood and marsh water, eyes burning with something older than rage. You don't belong to her, he said, voice shaking. You never did. Valora's smile faded. Her hand lowered, and Morel turned slowly to face the man who had once sworn he would find her, even in the darkest fire. I told you, he said, stepping forward. I'd find you again. Malachi's boots struck the obsidian floor like the crack of judgment. The chamber pulsed once in protest, as if the veil itself recoiled from his presence. His coat, soaked and torn, clung to him like a second skin, the scent of salt water and burnt air following him in thick waves. One of his arms hung limp at his side, but the other clutched a blade blackened at the tip, half flame, half shadow. The sigil branded over his heart still glowed faintly, though faded from the crossing. Valora narrowed her eyes. You were never supposed to survive the crossing. I wasn't supposed to do a lot of things, Malachi said, stepping forward. But here I am. Morel stared, the breath caught in her chest. Her hands hovered at her sides, caught between reaching and defending, between the mother who burned her into being and the man who had walked through hell to bring her back. Is this another trick? She asked, her voice sharp but trembling. No trick, Malachi said, his gaze never leaving hers. I heard your name, Morel. I followed it all the way here. Valora stepped down from her throne. The basin hissed beneath her bare feet, boiling where her soles touched the surface. You are out of time, Blood Shadow. This moment was not meant for you. Malachi moved between her and Morel. Then I'll unmake the moment. Valora's veil flared like wings, and from its folds rose embers that shaped into jagged creatures, limbs like splintered glass, heads like twisted flames. They formed in silence, summoned not by words, but by intent alone. Amara stepped forward too, blade drawn, her fire rising. Don't make us turn this chamber into a pyre. You couldn't burn what I've become, Valora whispered. We don't have to burn you, Malachi said, lifting his weapon. Just stop you. Valora's eyes, those endless black wells, tilted slightly. He was loyal once, she said to Morel, almost wistful. He came to me before her, before Zahara branded him with love. That was never love, Malachi said. It was control, and I broke it. You broke nothing, Valora snapped, her voice finally hardening. You are still what I made you. He raised his blade. Then let's see how your creation ends. The chamber erupted into chaos. The bone throne shattered in a shriek of splintering ivory as Malachi charged. Valora's flame-born monsters lunged, but Amara met them mid-stride, her blade trailing arcs of gold heat, slicing through their ash-woven limbs. Morel stood frozen at the center, her breath loud in her ears, the fire inside her trembling, uncertain. It didn't surge like before. It didn't crave violence. It waited. Morel, Amara shouted, the flame, you have to decide. But Morel heard a different voice, a softer one, her own. Or perhaps the girl she'd once been. You don't need to become the fire. You are what remembers it. She closed her eyes, and she called, not with power, not with fury, but with memory. The chamber shivered, the embers dimmed. The obsidian basin at her feet cracked with a single sound, like a heart breaking in two. And then from the fissure, light poured. Not red, not orange, white, pure. Fire stripped of vengeance, of legacy. Fire not as weapon, but as witness. Valora paused, her mouth opening in disbelief. No, you can't. I don't choose you, Morel said, her voice calm now, clear. And I don't choose Zahara either. She stepped to the center of the broken basin, the light rising around her. I choose myself. The fire surged, not upward but inward, into her, through her. It did not roar, it breathed. And when it exhaled, Valora's monsters fell to ash. Valora herself stumbled back, her veil fraying at the edges. You'll destroy everything. I'll rebuild it, Morel whispered. Malachi and Amara stood on either side now, their weapons lowered, not in defeat, but reverence. Valora collapsed to one knee. Her veil slid from her shoulders, revealing a face that was no longer divine, no longer terrible, just old, worn, tired. You've unbound the pale brand, she said, will collapse. That it, Morel said. The old fire forgot what it meant to protect. It only learned how to punish. That ends here. Cracks echoed across the chamber like ribs breaking in the earth itself. The glowing memory glass in the walls burst one by one, and with each, another tether of Valora's power fell away. The path they'd come from sealed behind them in flame, not as a trap, but as a gate closing for good. Valora lifted her head one last time. You are no flamekeeper. Morel stepped down from the basin. Toward her. You did it, Amara whispered, her voice hoarse. Morel turned. We did it. Malachi, quiet until now, said. The veil's going to fall. That part wasn't a lie. Let it fall, Morel said. We're still here. They made their way back through the shattered spiral. The ash trees beyond were alight, not burning, but glowing with the remnants of the white fire that had passed through her. And from deep within the marsh, Something called out. Not the hollow, not Valora. Something older, awakened by the unbinding. Morel looked to Amara, then Malachi. We're not done. No, Malachi said, his fingers brushing hers. But we're not alone anymore, Amara added, voice full of the old fire. The right kind, the kind that built, the kind that healed. And as they stepped out into the dark again, the veil hung lower than it had in centuries, a sky of threads and unraveling stars. Watching, waiting. But this time, it did not remember them with hunger. It remembered them with hope. Chapter 25, Hollow Crown, Chapter Separator. The light didn't last. By the time they reached the outer marsh, the pale glow that had lingered in the ash trees had faded to embers. Not gone, but quiet, dormant. Morel could still feel it under her skin, like the echo of a heartbeat, not entirely her own. But she knew better now than to mistake the fire for her purpose. It had served her, not consumed her, and that made all the difference. They crossed into a stretch of land known as Low Hollow, where the trees grew thinner and the water turned still as obsidian. No frogs croaked here, no birdsong. The air felt brittle, tense, as if the land itself waited for a judgment it was not sure it would survive. Malachi walked ahead, his blade sheathed, but his shoulders taut. Amara stayed close to Morel, her hand hovering near her waist where her weapon waited. Neither spoke much. There wasn't room for words yet, only vigilance. The kind born from victories that felt too clean, too early. Morel slowed near a bent cypress, its roots wrapped in a ring of carved bone. This is new, she murmured, reaching down. The bone wasn't old. The markings still carried the blood of whoever had carved them. Fresh, raw. Malachi turned. A ward, hollowborn. Amara crouched beside him. Then Valora wasn't the end. She was a door, Malachi said, one we weren't supposed to open. Morel felt the fire stir faintly again, as if in agreement. A howl split the marsh, low, guttural, and full of pain. They froze. The sound didn't come from the hollow's creatures. It was something human, or had once been. It echoed again, closer this time, from the ruins of a long-forgotten shrine further east, where the marsh swallowed all things in time. We should go around, Amara said. Morel shook her head. No, that sound, it's familiar. You sure? Morel didn't answer. She just walked. They reached the shrine minutes later. The place was in shambles. A half-collapsed altar of saltstone, drowned pillars, tattered prayer cloths, still dancing in the wind. But in the center of it all, bound in thorns and silver thread, was a body. At first, it didn't move. Then it looked up. Eyes black, skin split at the mouth from too much screaming. A brand on its chest, spiraled like the pale sigil, but inverted, jagged where it should have been smooth. And it spoke a single name, Malachi. Amara drew her blade. What the hell is that? Malachi took a step forward. Rasan. You know him? Morel asked. I did, he replied, before the hollow took him. The creature laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. They never took me. I gave myself. Malachi stared, expression unreadable. You were one of us. I still am. But I remember the truth now. Valora wasn't the beginning. She was a shroud, a pretty lie. The hollow wears many crowns, Malachi, and she wasn't the only queen. Morel felt the cold before it came, the kind of cold that peeled back the layers of the world and left the marrow exposed. A shadow moved through the trees. Not quickly, but deliberately, like it had all the time in the world. And then she stepped into the open. The hollow crown. Not Valora. This one wore no veil. Her face was as bare as bone, her skin pale, with veins like etched script. Her hair hung like seaweed, her eyes pits of silver, her mouth curved, not into a smile, but something worse. Recognition. "Little fire," she said, her voice silk with rot. "I've been waiting." Amara moved in front of Morel. "No need," the queen said. "I didn't come to take her. I came to finish what Valora could not." Malachi stepped forward. "You're one of the old ones." The queen nodded. "Older than the veil. Older than Zahara's bloodlines. I wore the hollow before it had a name." Morel raised her chin. "Then you know it's not yours anymore." The queen's laugh was soft and terrible. "I never claimed to own it. I became it." The shrines cracked behind them. The water hissed, and the queen lifted a single hand. The bound man, Rasan, began to rise, but not of his own accord. The thorns drove deeper into him, pushing through flesh, snapping bone. Malachi cursed and ran forward, cutting the bindings free, catching the man before he collapsed. "You'll have to do better than that," Amara said, lifting her flame. But the queen didn't flinch. "I don't need to fight you. The flame inside the girl will burn her again soon, and this time there won't be anyone left to anchor her." Morel felt it, what the queen meant, a flicker beneath her skin, a twitch in her pulse. The hollow queen wasn't trying to defeat them with violence. She was waiting for the fire to turn. "You want me to burn," Morel said. "I want you to remember that fire is hunger, that it was never yours, that Zahara took it from the dark, and so did you." Amara stood beside her. "Don't listen." Morel whispered, "I have to," and she stepped forward. The hollow queen didn't move, just watched as Morel approached. "I won't become you," Morel said. The queen tilted her head. "You already have. No, I've seen what the fire can do, and I've seen what it can choose not to do." "Then show me," the queen said, holding out a hand. Morel did not take it. Instead, she reached inward, and for the second time in days, she called the fire, not as fury, not as punishment, but as memory. The flame came, white. It poured out of her, but gently this time. Like rain, not lightning. The queen hissed, recoiling. "You don't control it anymore," Morel said. "I do." The queen opened her mouth, to scream, to command, to curse. But the flame caught her words, and then it caught her crown. The woven antler and ash circlet she wore burst into white light. It didn't burn. It dissolved. And the queen was left bare. Small, frail, old. She fell to her knees, eyes wide. "I remember now," she said. "I remember before the hollow." Morel crouched beside her. "Then remember who you were before the hunger." The queen trembled, and then she vanished, not in violence, not in defeat, but in peace. The wind returned. Malachi helped Rasan to his feet. Amara sheathed her blade, and Morel looked up at the thinning trees, where the sky bled into stars again. "She wasn't the last," Amara said quietly. "No," Morel replied, "but she was the crown, and now it's broken." Malachi turned toward the west. "The veil's nearly gone." Morel nodded. "Then we're running out of time." And as they walked, back toward the shack, back toward whatever would rise from the ashes, Morel did not feel like the girl who had set fire to a curse. She felt like the one who had inherited a kingdom of ghosts. A hollow crown once worn by monsters, now burned into nothing. Now it was hers to bury, and to choose what rose after. Morel said nothing as they made their way from the ruins. Every step forward was one further from the girl she used to be, and deeper into something stranger, something more hers. The marsh wind clung to her skin like breath, and the fire inside her was no longer something she battled. It was something she listened to. Not a storm, not a scream, but a voice. One that whispered in blood and memory. Malachi walked in silence beside her. The man who had once seemed unshakable now looked worn thin, like a blade that had been honed too many times. His arms supported Rasan, whose breathing was ragged, uneven, and more spirit than flesh. But there was something in Rasan's expression, shame, maybe, or clarity, that he had survived whatever the Hollow Queen had done to him, and still held on to a piece of himself, however small. "She turned you," Malachi said at last. "Not an accusation, just truth." Rasan nodded weakly. "She didn't need to break me, just show me the rot beneath what we built." "You believed her?" "I believed the part of me that had already started to decay." Amara slowed just ahead of them. Her eyes were scanning the path, but Morel could tell she wasn't only watching for threats. She was thinking, calculating. "We need to get him back to the shack." The markings along his spine weren't hollow-born. Something older, something worse. Rasan let out a rough laugh. "You always did know how to comfort a dying man." "You're not dying," Amara said. "Feels like it. That's guilt. You'll live." They didn't stop again until they reached the edge of the water, where the moss grew thick and the air smelled of salt and root. Morel touched a tree in passing and blinked when her fingers tingled. The bark was warm, not like fire, like memory. "They're watching," she said quietly. "Who?" Amara asked. "The others, the ones we haven't met yet." Malachi looked back. "From the hollow. Maybe. Or maybe from before it." They moved faster after that. There was no safety here, not anymore. The veil had been pierced too many times, and though one queen had fallen, Morel could feel others stirring in the wake of her silence. This wasn't the kind of story that ended with one flame. When they reached the shack, they didn't speak. Amara opened the door. Malachi carried Rasan inside. Morel stood just outside the threshold, staring into the dark. There was a figure. Not close, but near enough to be seen. A woman in white, hair coiled into tight braids, standing knee-deep in the water. Her eyes glowed gold, not like the fire, like the sun rising through fog. She didn't speak, but Morel felt the words in her marrow. "One crown ends, another begins. Choose wisely, Fireborn. Not all thrones are meant to be kept." The figure faded before Amara came back to the door. "You okay?" she asked. "No," Morel said, "but I'm ready." Inside, Wasan was asleep. His chest rose in uneven movements, but his skin no longer looked ashen. Malachi had drawn sigils along the floor, wards against the hollow, glyphs passed down from Zahara's own guardians. Amara paced the room once, then finally sat, rubbing the heel of her palm into her temple. "I don't think this is over," she said. "It's not," Morel agreed. Amara looked at her then. Really looked. That queen, she wasn't after you just for the flame. She wanted to give it back. Not to me. Through me. "That's a curse," Amara said. "To be made a vessel." "No," Morel said softly. "It's a choice." Malachi looked up from his place near the door. "And what will you choose when the next crown tries to settle on your head?" Morel stepped forward. She wasn't afraid anymore. "I'll burn it." The wind outside changed. It didn't whistle anymore. It sang, and somewhere in the trees, something howled, not in rage, in warning. The hollow was shifting, and for the first time, it was afraid of her. That night, the fire didn't dream. It remembered. Morel stood alone outside the shack as the others slept, her toes buried in the damp earth, head tilted toward the shivering trees. Moonlight dripped through the canopy like candle wax, and in it, she saw flickers, faces not her own. Zahara's rage, the Hollow Queen's hunger. the pale child who whispered names into the dirt. All of them echoes now, all of them folded into her spine like a second shadow. And in the hush between her heartbeats, she heard her name called, not by the living, not by the dead, but by the flame. She turned slowly, every part of her alert. The air had thickened with heat, though no fire burned nearby. Across the clearing stood a man Morel had never seen before, but knew immediately. Not because of his face, worn, handsome, and haunted, but because of the crown that shimmered above his brow. Invisible, but unmistakable. His presence thrummed like blood from an open wound. "You're the one they're waiting for," he said, voice low and raw. "Who are you?" she asked. "I wore the flame before Zahara, before the marsh split open and swallowed her name." Morel narrowed her eyes. "Then you're dead." "I was." He took a step forward. "But the hollow doesn't end us. Not truly. It collects us, breaks us down until all that's left is the part of ourselves we swore we'd never become." "Why are you here?" He stopped just short of the tree line, shadows dancing across his bare chest, which bore the same flame-shaped scar that now marked her own collarbone. "Because the crown doesn't want a queen anymore," he said. "It wants a god." She blinked, a flicker of fire curling behind her eyes. "Then it can burn." He smiled, slow and grim. "That's what I said too." The wind carried the scent of ash then, and just like that, he vanished. Morel remained standing there, long after the warmth faded. When Amara finally found her, the sky had begun to shift into pre-dawn hues, casting everything in shades of soft blue and pearl. "You saw something," Amara said quietly. "Yes." "Was it her again?" Morel shook her head. "Someone older, one of the first." Amara's brow furrowed. "The flame bearers." "He said the crown doesn't want to be worn anymore. It wants to be worshipped." Amara looked back toward the shack, and Rawson thought we were running from the hollow. Morel clenched her fists. "We're not running." "Not anymore." They walked back together, the quiet stretching between them, like a wound that hadn't finished scabbing over. The others stirred as they entered. Malachi sat sharpening his blade by the fire pit, while Khalil leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, listening. "There's movement in the eastern marsh," Khalil said without greeting. "Smoke trails," sounded like chanting. Amara looked to Malachi. "Veilborn? Maybe. Or Holocan. Whatever they are, they're gathering. And they're not hiding." Rasan groaned softly from the cot. "Let them come." "You should be resting," Amara snapped. He opened one eye. "We've rested too long." Morel crossed the room, kneeling beside him. "You said Valora broke you." "She showed me what we abandoned when we sealed the first breach. The others. The ones we left behind in the dark." "What others?" He coughed once, blood speckling his lips. "The pale court." The name stopped the room. Even Malachi went still. "They were the ones who first fed on the hollow, who crowned themselves kings of the forgotten. We cast them out, burned them in the first purge." "And they lived?" Amara asked. Rasan shook his head. "They waited." Malachi stood. "Then we'll need to decide now. Do we stand and fight, or vanish into the dark again?" Morel rose slowly. "I'm done hiding." "So what then?" Khalil asked. "You take the hollow crown?" "No," she said. Amara raised a brow. "Then what?" Morel's eyes glowed faintly, the fire dancing just beneath the surface of her skin. "I melted." The room fell silent again. Not out of doubt, but awe. In the corner, the old kettle began to hiss, and outside the wind shifted. This time, it didn't sound like morning. It sounded like awakening. By dusk, the sky had turned copper. The kind of color Morel remembered from stories, the kind that warned of old things stirring. Rasan had fallen into a deep sleep, body twitching every now and then, as if some part of him remained caught between two worlds. Amara stood at the edge of the shack porch, arms folded, her gaze sweeping across the marsh. Like it might offer her an answer it had never given anyone else. Malachi cleaned his weapons in silence. Each motion was ritual. Blade, cloth, oil, flame, again. The fire was speaking for her now. Soft rhythmic pulses of memory passed through the orange glow. Faces, flames, thrones of ash. It whispered of a crown that had lived too long and broken too many who tried to wear it. "You feel it, don't you?" Amara asked without turning. Morel nodded. "It's near." Malachi looked up. "The crown?" "No," she said. She dragged her fingers through the dirt. "What comes to claim it?" At first, there was no sound, only the rustle of reeds and the groaning of trees too old to care about the war beneath them. But then, a voice echoed through the marsh, smooth as silk and cold as a crypt. "Little fire, born twice and burning still, shall we kneel now or after the ash falls?" The shadows thickened. From the tree line, figures emerged. Tall, draped in dark cloth that moved like oil, their faces obscured by bone-white masks carved in grimaces and silence. Each of them bore a brand upon their chest, a circle cracked down the center, bleeding gold. Malachi stood first, his sword already in hand. Khalil joined him, the old hunter's fingers wrapped around the haft of his curved axe. Amara moved toward Mirel without taking her eyes off the advancing strangers. The lead figure stopped just at the edge of the ward line Malachi had drawn in salt and chalk. "Are you the girl they whisper about?" the masked one asked. "I am," Mirel said. "And do you wear the hollow crown?" "I carry what they gave me," she said. "But I don't serve it." A pause. "Then you are a heretic." Amara snorted. "That's rich, coming from something dressed like a failed sermon." The masked stranger reached up slowly and removed their mask. Beneath it was a face not aged by time, but eroded by it. Eyes like smoked glass, skin too pale, too smooth, stretched over something that didn't feel entirely human. "I am Lysandra," they said, "last of the pale crown. I watched Sahara burn. I drank the scream of the first breach. You are not fireborn. You are fire stolen." Mirel rose. No fear in her limbs, just the heat, just the voice. "You want this crown?" she asked, her own breath turning gold at the edges. Lysandra nodded. "Then step inside this line," she said. The wind died. And then Lysandra did. He crossed the threshold in one smooth motion. And the fire met him. It roared up from the symbols carved into the earth, surged from the cracks between planks, bled from the trees like old sap turned molten. Mirel raised her hand, not to call the flame, but to shape it. "You wear a crown of ghosts," she said. Her voice layered now. Sahara echoed in her. Valora whispered beneath. "Even the unknown king from before, but I carry the names." Lysandra opened his mouth. The fire filled it. In a single breath, he burned, not screaming, not flailing, simply gone. Ash curling where he stood, mask clattering to the floor. The others didn't move. Mirel stepped forward, face streaked with smoke. "You want what's mine?" she called to the remaining masked figures. "Then kneel or burn with him." They looked to one another. One dropped to their knees, then another, and another, until only the sound of frogs and flame remained. Amara walked to Morel's side, silent. "You didn't just melt the crown," she said after a moment. "You replaced it." Morel looked out at the kneeling figures, hollowborn, pale-brand, remnants of fallen courts. "I don't want to rule," she whispered. "But they need something to follow," Malachi said from behind her. "I'm not Sahara. No, Amara said. "You're something worse." Mirel looked at her. "Something better," she corrected. And deep beneath the marsh, something ancient shuddered in its sleep. Something that knew a new fire had been lit, and it would never go out. Chapter 26. The Night She Let Me In. Chapter Separator. The sky wept gold. At first, Amara thought it was another hallucination, some trick of firelight and memory. But no. The river that bordered the eastern marsh had begun to shimmer, slow and thick, its surface rippling with streaks of luminous amber. Not fire, not magic. Blood that gleamed like molten sunlight. Malachi stood at the edge of the bank, blade at his back, his shoulders rigid. "The river bleeds," he muttered. "It's not just the river," Mirel said from behind them. They turned. She stood with bare feet in the reeds, her cloak torn, the mark on her chest glowing faintly beneath the torn collar of her shirt. In her right hand was the shattered crown of Lysandra, the last Pale King, its broken arc steaming in the early mist. "It's the earth. It's remembering." Rawson hobbled from the shack's doorway, leaning on a carved staff. "Gold blood," he rasped. "It means the seal is rupturing." "I thought we stopped it," Khalil said. "No," Amara murmured. "We only lit a fire big enough for it to see us again." The river hissed, the sound like thousands of tongues wetting cracked lips. From somewhere behind the tree line, laughter rippled. Not cruel, not joyful, just knowing. And then came the footfalls. One by one, shapes emerged from the golden mist. Men and women draped in marsh, silk, and bone armor, their eyes alight with something older than hunger. Hollow-touched, yes, but more than that. "Veil walkers," Rasan whispered, "from the drowned kingdoms." Mirel stepped forward, fire coiling from her palm. But Amara touched her wrist gently. "Let me." Mirel blinked. "Why?" Amara's eyes were calm, focused. "Because the flame isn't the only one that remembers." She walked slowly toward the line of approaching figures. Not a weapon drawn, no heat on her skin. Just her heartbeat, just her name. She didn't speak until she was close enough to see their faces. "I am Amara Whitaker," she said, voice low but steady. "Descendant of the first ember, keeper of the Zahari flame, and I am not here to bow." A woman stepped forward, tall, with vines braided into her pale dreadlocks and symbols inked beneath her eyes. "And yet you carry the blood of queens." "I carry more than that," Amara replied. "I carry the night she let me in." The woman's head tilted. "You mean Zahara." "No," Amara said. "I mean the girl, the one who could have burned me down, the one who was supposed to become the next great monster. She let me in." The golden river began to stir behind them, curling around reeds like fingers dragging claws. "And now?" the Veilwalker asked. "She's not alone," Amara said. Mirel moved beside her, silent, her eyes glowing, not with wrath, but with choice. The Veilwalkers hesitated. Their leader studied them both. And then, slowly, she knelt. One by one, the others followed. The river calmed. Khalil exhaled slowly, lowering his weapon. That's one problem down. Malachi gave a grunt. Or one more war delayed. Rasan smiled despite himself. It's the same thing these days. That night, they built no fire. The land was too hot with memory already. Instead, they gathered in the quiet, the wounded among them resting, the others keeping watch. Amara couldn't sleep. She walked past the leaning door of the shack and down to the water's edge, where the gold had already begun to fade. Mirel was there, standing barefoot in the silt, the crown gone, her hair loose in the wind. "You didn't have to stop me," Mirel said softly. "I didn't," Amara replied. "I asked you to let me speak. I wasn't sure I could. But you did." They stood there in silence a while. Morel's voice broke the stillness. Do you remember that night? The first one? Amara nodded. The firelight in the old temple. The way your hands shook, but you wouldn't let go. You asked if I was ready, and you said you weren't sure. Morel turned to her. Her eyes didn't burn, they shimmered. I am now. Amara swallowed. Sure of what? Morel stepped closer. That I choose you again. Not because I have to. Not because the fire wills it. But because I want to. Amara didn't speak. She didn't need to. When Morel kissed her, it wasn't a flame. It was an anchor. A promise. A home. And for the first time in her long, blood-lit life, Amara let herself be held. Let herself be let in. The night held them, and nothing burned. Not this time. Not yet. By midnight, the marsh had gone still again, as if exhaling after centuries of tension. The creatures had gone quiet. The wind had softened, and for the first time in days, there was no threat pressing in on them from the dark. Only the space left behind by its absence. Morel lay beside Amara on the cot inside the shack, their shoulders just touching. Neither had said anything in a while. The silence wasn't awkward. It was earned. Outside, the sounds of shifting guards and settling ash drifted like distant waves. But here, the air was thick with everything that hadn't been spoken between them until now. You used to scare me, Morel finally said. Amara turned her head. When? At the beginning, when I first saw you in the temple of Zahari. You weren't afraid of the fire like the others. You looked at it like it belonged to you. I was raised to believe it did. But it doesn't, does it? Amara exhaled slowly. No, it never did. It belongs to whoever survives it and still chooses to carry it. Morel shifted, turning to face her fully. You survived it. Amara nodded. But you didn't carry it. That made Amara blink. What do you mean? You buried it. You hid it behind all the fighting, the orders, the things you thought you had to be. Morel's voice wasn't accusatory, just true. But the fire remembers who you were before all that. I wasn't strong then. You were honest. The words hit Amara harder than a blade ever could. She didn't respond immediately. She just looked at the beams of moonlight slicing through the broken slats in the shack walls. Dust swirled in the pale glow. For a moment, it looked like ash. I don't know who I am without a battle, Amara admitted. Without something to fight. Something to protect you from. Morel reached across the narrow space between them and took her hand. Then stop fighting me. Amara turned her eyes to hers. I don't know how. Yes, you do. Morel smiled softly. You let me in tonight. Amara swallowed. Her fingers tightened slightly around Morel's. I didn't think you'd want what's left of me. I don't want what's left of you, Morel whispered. I want all of you, even the parts you think are too scorched to touch. For a long moment, Amara said nothing. Her breath trembled in her chest. Her throat ached. Then she leaned in, and for the second time that night, they kissed. Not with urgency, not with need, but with understanding. With choice. The kind of kiss that wasn't about heat, but about home. When they parted, Amara rested her forehead against Morel's. You're the only thing I've ever wanted that didn't ask me to burn first. Morel smiled. You don't have to burn anymore. The night stretched out around them, and for once, neither flame nor fear chased them into their dreams. But the quiet didn't last. Far away at the edge of the salt marsh, where no flame reached and no crown ruled, a psalm rose. It was low and wet, sung in a tongue long forbidden. It came from beneath the bog root and black stone, from a throat not touched by breath in generations. A child knelt at the water's edge, not alive, not fully. Her hair floated around her like drowned kelp. Her eyes were hollow, and her hands were cupped. Inside them was the last drop of Zahara's blood. The child sang the final line, and the veil thinned. The hollow stirred, and the one who would wear the crown, not in flame, but in shadow, finally opened their eyes. The singing stopped. Far away, but Amara felt the chill of it, like breath down her spine. She sat upright in the cot, careful not to disturb Morel, who had dozed off with her fingers still laced in Amara's. The room smelled of old cedar and dried blood. The silence had shifted, not broken, but bent in a way only a fighter would notice. A tremor ran through the floorboards. Amara rose, quietly, slowly. Her bare feet met the wooden planks without a sound. She eased open the shack door and stepped into the marsh-lit night. The moon was half-shuttered by mist. Fog clung to the trees like old ghosts. She could see the river still, its gold sheen nearly gone, the current running slow and black again. But the trees were whispering. She stepped further, past the first post where a small lantern burned. Khalil was there, sharpening his blade. "You felt that too?" he asked without looking up. "I did." "Rasan says something's coming." "He always says something's coming. This time, I believe him." Amara glanced toward the trees. "Where is he now?" Khalil nodded west, said the spirit started answering again. "He went to ask why." The sky cracked. No thunder, no storm. Just a rip in the air like skin tearing on stone. Amara tensed. Then Morel's voice called behind her, sharp and awake. "Something's wrong." She turned to see the girl standing barefoot in the doorway, eyes alight with heat that didn't burn. Her breath misted even in the warm air. It's like something's unmade itself," she said, stepping closer. Amara caught her by the arm. "What did you see?" "Not see." Morel's gaze darted to the trees. "Feel, like part of the veil just fell. Not here, but not far." A howl cut through the night. Not an animal, not human. It was remembering something. Khalil stood, blade ready. Then the mist parted, and Malachi walked out of it. His coat was damp, black hair slicked to his forehead, eyes grim. He looked like he'd just climbed from the grave, and maybe he had. "I found it," he said, the name that was spoken. Amara frowned. "What name?" "The one whispered into the dirt, by the child. The one that fire remembered." He looked to Morel, then back to Amara. "She didn't just awaken a memory. She woke a lineage." Amara's chest tightened. "Zahara's bloodline?" "No," Malachi said. "The one she destroyed to keep the fire sacred. The one that once tried to bend the flame to their will." Morel inhaled sharply. "Valora." Malachi nodded. "She's returned," he said, "and she's not alone." Behind him, more shadows flickered in the trees. Figures stepped through, pale-faced, marked with ash. Hollow-eyed but living. A scouting party. Not enemies. Not yet. But not allies either. "They've started gathering," Malachi added. "All those with any drop of fire blood left. She's calling them." "For what?" Amara asked. He met her gaze. "To finish what Zahara started, or to undo it." The ground pulsed faintly beneath their feet. A storm wasn't coming. It had already begun, and all the fire in the world couldn't keep them from what waited beyond the next sunrise. Amara turned to Morel. "We stay together," she said. Morel nodded once. "Always." Malachi drew his blade and glanced to the sky. "Then let's go meet her." They moved as one. Amara, Morel, and Malachi passed beneath the ashen boughs in silence, the air thick with ancient tension, not the kind born of war, but of memory, the kind that settled into soil and bone and refused to be buried. Even Malachi, who had faced death with a smirk more times than she could count, walked now with reverence, with weight. The path led them past the stone markers that had no names, only glyphs scorched into their surfaces. Zahara's language, one that only the flame-born could read. Morel's steps slowed. Her hand brushed one of the glyphs. The stone responded, glowing faintly. "Here," she whispered. "This is where they made the pact." Amara halted beside her. "The flame accord?" Morel nodded. But it wasn't just Zahara. There were others. 13 names that were struck from record. "And one that wasn't," Malachi added. "Valora." Morel's fingers trembled against the glyph. She was the only one who refused to kneel to the flame. She didn't want to be a vessel. She wanted to command it. "She lost," Amara said softly. "No," Morel whispered. She waited. The fog shifted. Not wind, movement. Amara turned sharply, blade drawn without thinking. Malachi had already moved to flank her, his eyes glowing faintly crimson in the dark. Morel stood still, her breath calm. Though the mark on her neck had begun to burn again, shapes emerged from the mist. Figures. Not hollow, not quite veiled. Their eyes shimmered like ember-soaked coals. Some were young, others ancient. All of them wore the same brand, an unhealed sigil carved into the skin over their hearts. The pale brand. They stopped just 10 paces away. The one in front stepped forward. She was tall, with silver hair coiled like a crown, and eyes that flickered like dying stars. "I remember you," she said, her voice rough with age and prophecy, her gaze fixed on Amara. "You were Zahara's sword, and you are a daughter of Ash, the last speaker of the flame unbound. My name is Ellarine. I serve the crown of hollow light." Amara lowered her sword, but only slightly. "Valora's name is being whispered again. It is no longer a whisper." Morel stepped beside Amara. "You've come to resurrect her." Ellarine nodded slowly. "We've come because she was never dead." Silence fell. Morel's lips parted. "That's not possible. Zahara defeated her." "She did," Ellarine said. "But Valora chose exile, not death. She passed through the thinning, bound in root and salt and silence. We have waited for the bloodline to awaken again, and it has." Her eyes dropped to Morel. "The child who carries both flames." Amara moved instinctively between them. "She's not yours." Ellarine didn't flinch. "No, she is her own, but she must choose." "I already have," Morel said, voice steady. "I chose not to burn the world. I chose to live in it. That choice will be tested." Ellarine extended a hand, not in threat, but in warning. "The pale brand does not kneel, and the hollow crown will rise with or without you." Then, as if summoned by the speaking of her name, the fog behind them cracked like ice. Valora stepped from its heart. She did not look like a ghost. She did not shimmer or fade. She was real. A woman in white robes scorched at the hem, hair like spun obsidian, eyes like 2 dying moons. Morel gasped. Amara didn't breathe. Valora's gaze fell first on Morel. "You look like her," she said, "but you're not her. And that makes you perfect." She smiled. The trees burned behind her. Chapter 27. Ember. After chapter separator. The forest burned in silence. No scream, no explosion, just the unholy whisper of flame devouring memory. Ash fell like snow, gray and slow, as if mourning the trees it came from. The veil had thinned to the width of a wound, pulsing, ragged, and raw. And in that wound stood Morel, eyes wide with firelight and fate. Amara stood behind her, sword drawn, heart heavy. Malachi to her left, gaze locked on Valora, who stood with arms raised and face serene in the inferno's glow. She wasn't commanding the fire. She was it. But not like Morel, Not like Zahara. This was not the burden of a legacy. This was dominion. Ballora spoke, voice low and precise. The flame never dies. It only remembers. Morel's voice wavered, not in fear, but defiance. Then let it remember what we do here tonight. Lightning cracked across the broken sky. Red, unnatural, somewhere beyond the veil. Spirits shrieked and twisted. The hollow kin had begun to answer Vallora's summons. The fire didn't just stir anymore, it called. Amara moved beside Morel. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her presence was the oath. Her blade, the punctuation. Vallora turned her gaze on Amara. "You could have been one of us," she said, "if you just let go of Zahara's guilt." "I don't carry her guilt," Amara said. "I carry her grace." Vallora's smile curled like smoke. Grace is just regret in prettier clothes. The flame in Morel's chest flickered. Amara felt it. The girl was struggling, not against Vallora's power, but her pull. The fire inside her wanted something it hadn't tasted since Zahara's death. A mirror. "You want to control it," Morel said, stepping forward. "That's why the fire never chose you. You don't want to keep it safe. You want to make it kneel." Vallora raised a hand. "The fire kneels to no one." "You do," Morel said softly. "You kneel to your anger." A sharp gust blew through the trees, fanning the flames, but none touched the girl. Vallora's expression faltered. For just a breath, she saw Zahara in Morel. Not the warrior, the woman, the one who chose life over victory. That, more than anything, threatened her. "You think you can unmake me," Vallora whispered. "You think this moment changes anything?" "It changes everything," Morel said. She stepped forward again, and this time Amara didn't follow. She knew this part wasn't hers. It was never hers. This was Morel's fight. Not of fists or blades, but will. Vallora's form shimmered at the edges, heat warping reality. The pale brand flickered on the ash-marked followers behind her, many of whom looked uncertain now. Ellerine stood at their edge, silent, hands folded. The mark on Morel's neck burned brighter, shaping itself into Zahara's sigil. The symbol had never looked so clear. Vallora extended her hand. "Come with me, your flame. You are not meant to be a keeper. You are the fire, the spark that can cleanse the rot. Let the world burn and start anew." Morel shook her head. "I don't want to burn the world. I want to heal it." "Then you'll fail," Vallora spat, "because healing takes longer than fire. It demands more, and people won't wait. They'll kill you before they thank you." Morel's eyes glowed gold. "Then I'll die on my feet." The ground shook. From beneath the marsh and ruin, from beneath the oldest roots, something stirred. A presence that had no name, only memory. Zahara's flame, not a ghost, not a voice, but the impression of 1,000 choices. Amara felt it. Malachi did too. The very trees bent toward Morel. She didn't flinch. She stepped into the firelight and raised her hand, not to strike, but to release. "Let the flame choose," she said. The veil tore open behind Vallora. From its depths came a sound like weeping steel, like every echo Zahara had buried erupting at once. The fire didn't rush Morel. It bowed, and then it flew toward Vallora, not as a weapon, as a mirror. Vallora staggered, face stricken. She reached toward the blaze, but it recoiled. "You never understood it," Morel said. "The flame doesn't obey. It listens." Vallora screamed as the fire encircled her, not burning, not binding, remembering. Her past, her crimes, her sorrow, the lives she twisted, the names she tried to erase, hers. The hollow kin behind her began to retreat. Some wept openly, others dropped to their knees. Ellerine turned and vanished into the smoke. Valora crumbled. Amara stepped forward then, slowly, unsure if it was truly over. The flames pulled back, leaving Valora kneeling in the blackened marsh, weeping. Not a goddess, not a tyrant, a woman, finally touched by consequence. Mirel's hand trembled. Should we end it? Malachi asked softly. No, Amara said. She's ended herself. They turned. The veil behind them began to mend, the breach slowly closing, but not entirely. Nothing ever closes fully. They walked back toward the edge of the marsh, toward the shack that had once been a refuge, now a sacred place. The sky, long black, began to shift with hints of color. Not sunrise, but something older, a hue untouched by time. The color of beginnings. Mirel walked ahead. Amara lingered, watching the horizon. Malachi stayed with her. She's going to change everything, he said. She already has. What happens now? Amara looked to the flame that still danced in Mirel's wake. Now she decides how to carry the fire. And us? Amara smiled. We walk beside her until she doesn't need us anymore. He didn't argue. He just watched the girl move ahead, shoulders set, path clearing before her, like destiny written in smoke. The veil still hung low, but now it did not feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. Amara sheathed her blade. The marsh was quiet again, but in her bones, she knew the stillness would not last. Peace never did, but for now, it was enough. For the first time in years, she let herself believe, not in prophecy, not in flame, in Mirel, because the girl had done more than carry Zahara's power. She had forgiven it, and in doing so, rewritten its purpose. The hollow crown had crumbled. The pale brand had faded. The fire still burned, but now it danced freely. And for the first time in a long time, Amara was not alone in the ember after. Malachi stayed at the tree line a moment longer. His eyes followed Mirel's retreating figure, the way the firelight clung to her outline. Not in reverence, but recognition. The girl had stepped into her own myth and returned not as a legend, but as a living flame. Something mortal, something more. Do you think she'll ever forgive us? He asked. Amara didn't turn from the fading glow. For what? For doubting her. For treating her like a vessel, a weapon, anything but what she really is. She already has, Amara said softly. That's why she's who she is. He nodded and followed as she moved toward what remained of the altar. There, charred remnants of sigils still shimmered faintly under the ash. Names etched in soot and soot-stained prayers. Amara bent low and traced her fingers over one of the stones. Zahara's mark had faded, but something lingered beneath. The girl had not erased her. Mirel had written over her pain with presence. I never thought I'd live long enough to see the flame do something besides take, Amara said, brushing the ash from her fingertips. Malachi stood beside her, his voice low. It gave tonight, because she chose to give it a reason. Together, they turned and walked back through the clearing where Valora had made her last stand. She was gone now, not slain, not vanished, but left behind. A hollow crown unmade by its own weight. Behind the veil, something stirred again, but not in violence. The marsh, for the first time in decades, sighed. A breath released after being held too long. The trees straightened. The fog withdrew, and in the distance, frogs dared croak again, testing the silence as though unsure it would remain. They found Mirel sitting at the edge of the shack steps, barefoot now, her boots left discarded in the mud. Her hands were folded in her lap, the mark on her neck glowing like a coal banked low. I thought I'd feel different, she said as they approached. Amara knelt beside her. You are different. No, I'm more myself. Like, I burned through what wasn't mine. You did, Amara said, and what's left is exactly who you needed to be. Mirelle's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She leaned against Amara's shoulder, the contact quiet but anchoring. Malachi sat beside them on the step, one hand resting on his knee. He winced slightly from the wound in his ribs, but said nothing. "We're not done, are we?" Mirelle asked after a long moment. "No," Amara replied, "but we've begun." A silence followed, not empty, but whole. They sat there as the night restitched its quiet, the world rearranging itself around them. No alarms, no firelight, just breath, just heartbeat, just the hush that comes after something terrible is forgiven. Mirelle eventually rose and walked to the edge of the marsh, where the first reeds were regrowing. She knelt, pressed her hand to the water, and whispered something none of them could hear. The water answered her, not in words, not in vision, but with a ripple, a sign. The old blood was gone. The new fire had chosen not to consume, but to remember and replant. Later that night, Amara couldn't sleep. She lay on her side in the shack, the cot creaking beneath her as she stared at the wooden ceiling. Across the room, Malachi dozed restlessly, murmuring in his sleep. Mirelle slept between them, curled against her own shadow like a girl who had fought gods. Amara watched the way the girl's chest rose and fell. For so long, she had been fighting to protect a flame she didn't believe she could carry. She'd failed Zahara, failed others, failed herself. But Mirelle was the second chance she didn't know she'd get. And she had chosen Amara in return. That, more than anything, undid her. In the early hours, before even the frogs stirred, Amara finally let herself cry. Silent tears. Grief not for loss, but for survival. For the cost of hope. For the fact that the girl still breathed. And that tomorrow they would walk again. Toward what she didn't know. But not alone. Never again alone. The next morning, Mirelle stood on the edge of the path out of the marsh. The sky was rose-colored and soft, clouds stretching like bandages across a bruised world. She looked back once, not at the shack, not at the battlefield, but at the place where Valora had disappeared. Amara joined her. "She's not gone forever," Mirelle said. "No, she'll try again." "Yes, I'll be ready." Amara smiled. "You always are." Malachi caught up behind them, adjusting the strap of his pack. "Any chance we're going somewhere that isn't cursed this time?" Mirelle grinned faintly. "No," he sighed. "Didn't think so." They stepped forward together. The veil shimmered behind them, low but watchful. And beneath their feet, the marsh began to bloom. Tiny white flowers pushed through soot-stained soil. Not magic, not miracle, just life finding a way to rise again. Because someone had chosen to carry the fire without letting it consume them. Because a girl had stood before the oldest wound in the world and refused to let it define her. Because for once, the story had not ended in ash. It had begun in ember after. End postscript chapter separator. For Amara, you always burned louder than the rest of us. Even in the quiet, even when you said nothing at all, I could feel it. The heat under your skin, the way your eyes held storms, how your silences spoke louder than the wind, tearing through the trees. You carried fire like it was part of your spine, and you made me believe I could carry it too. I never told you this, not when I should have. But the night we met, really met, I recognized you. Not your face, not your name, but the ache in your soul. That bone-deep exhaustion, that hunger for something more than survival. I felt it like a mirror. And still, you gave me more than I thought I deserved. I would have followed you into the hollow, into the veil, into the dark the world forgot. I still will. Because you're not just flame and fury and legacy. You're the reason I stayed human in all the ways that mattered. You're the breath between bloodshed. The voice I still hear when everything else goes quiet. I read what you wrote. Every word, every ghost and ember. You said you wrote it down so we wouldn't get lost again. But Amara, you are the way back. And no matter what waits beyond the next veil, I'll find you. Always. Malachi.